Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to meet you all. Miss Sabrina Chow, Tim, Christine, and all distinguished guest speakers, panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very delighted to meet you all again in the HKUST conference room. I'm Billy Cheung, consultant of HKUST Institute for Environment, taking care of the stakeholder engagement. Here now we have today's full 4 hours event, and we have consists of 2 parts. The first part is on the maritime energy efficiency technologies, and second part will be on biofuels and carbon certification. For the first part, we will start with 4 speakers with a panel discussion, then a break, and the second part will have 5 speakers and a panel discussions as well. So for all the details, you can look at the web page. I won't go into details because it's too much, and especially for the speaker's bio. And now I hand over to Christine to give a welcome remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Billy, and thank you all for coming. I know the weather is not particularly good today. For those of you who've had to trek here, I hope you stayed dry. Thank you again for coming to HKUST. Many of you know Billy, but I just want to say that it's great for us at HKUST to be able to work with Billy, and Billy and I go back a very long way. We worked together in government, and he was at EPD, and just now Tim asked me, when did you get Billy? And I said, well, after he retired, we were very fortunate to have him as our consultants working on shipping issues. So I think many of you know that HKUST, we have a long history in working on shipping policy issues. And today, I think shipping has become just more important in Hong Kong's policies. And but it's coming at a time where decarbonization, there's a lot of churn in the business itself. So for us, we're not in the business. We're very close to the business. We're very interested in the business. We work in public policy. So we need to understand from you, people who are deep in the shipping business, different aspects of the shipping business, to get a sense on how to propose policies. We're very fortunate that in the last number of years, we've actually had funded research projects, and currently we are working on a number of projects. Some of them are funded directly by the government. So you will see in the 15 five-year plan, shipping is very important to China as a nation, but in Hong Kong itself, shipping and port development are also key. So the 15 five-year plan we are following. Also, Hong Kong is going to create its own first 5-year plan, where shipping and port development, again, is one of the core issues. So for the purposes of today, we are going to talk about one particular aspect. We're going quite deep because everything that Billy does always has both breadth and depth. So to start off with, apart from welcoming you all here, I want to also introduce for us 2 very special guests. First, we have Sabrina Chow, whom I think all of you actually know very well. We're delighted. I think this might be the first time you're coming for a shipping discussion at HKUST. Your brother has come before, and we're also very delighted to work with him. And then Tim. I haven't seen Tim for quite a number of years now, but as we were talking just now, my memory of Tim has always been the sort of front runner, because some of you might remember the Fair Winds Charter. The Fair Winds Charter was very important to Hong Kong because it provided a mark for an early group of shipping companies to actually be willing to go voluntarily to switch to a cleaner fuel when they berthed in Hong Kong. And that actually became the start of changing the national policy. And I was privileged to be involved in that whole process. But the person who came up with the idea that how about the shipping company putting their hand up and saying how many of you are willing to kind of go first to set an example, was of course Tim. So as I said, I will always remember Tim as the person who lit the fire. But Tim, you probably do not fully remember that you actually lit that fire. That fire that you lit led to China changing its entire policy. So what we do in Hong Kong, the kind of discussions that we have, if we're able to show something that is new or well constructed, it could have much wider implication. So without further ado, may I invite Sabrina to come and share a few words with us. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a profound honor and pleasure to stand before you today in the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I would like to extend my sincerest thanks to the Institute for the Environment, and particularly to Professor Christine Low and Professor Alexis Lau for the generous invitation to open this vital forum on maritime energy efficiency technologies, biofuels, and carbon certification. We are gathered here today to discuss the technical and regulatory pathways to a greener future. However, before we delve into the intricacies of carbon certification and energy efficiency, I must address the stark geopolitical reality that has cast a long dark shadow over our industry in recent months. As we convene today, the world is still very much entwined in this devastating conflict in the Middle East. The events that began in late February, leading to the closure and severe disruption of the Strait of Hormuz, sent an immediate shockwave through the global economy. With roughly 20% of global oil flows and a major share of LNG trade choked off, we saw oil prices surge past $120 a barrel. We witnessed over 700 vessels backed up, supply chain fractured, and a forced rerouting of ships around the Cape of Good Hope that added weeks to transit time and astronomical costs to global trade. But as a ship owner, and as someone who has spent my life in this industry, the economic fallout is secondary to the human tragedy. The toll on our seafarers has been nothing short of horrific. At the height of the crisis, we had some 20,000 seafarers stranded in the Gulf. These men and women were trapped on their vessels, unable to disembark due to wartime dangers, port restrictions, flight disruptions, and visa issues. Tragically, the IMO has confirmed that at least 10 seafarers have been killed in attacks on shipping since this conflict began, with many more injured. We have heard harrowing reports of crews sleeping fully clothed, terrified of drone and missile strikes, while others have faced abandonment and unpaid wages. I was privileged to serve as the president of BIMCO, the world's largest independent shipping association from 2021 to 2023. One of the major priorities during my tenure was to advocate for seafarers to be recognized as essential key workers. The recent crisis in the Middle East is a brutal reminder that this battle is far from over. Seafarers are the lifeblood of global trade. They transport the food we eat, the energy that powers our homes, and the goods we rely upon daily. Yet in times of crisis, they are too often treated as collateral damage. We cannot and must not allow this to become the accepted norm. Their safety, their mental health, and their fundamental rights must be our absolute top priority. We must demand better protections and safe corridors for our crews. This stark reality brings me to the core theme of our forum today, decarbonization. The geopolitical volatility we are witnessing only underscores the urgent need to transition away from a reliance on fossil fuels and vulnerable energy choke points. Yet the pathway to our 2050 net zero target is anything but straightforward. I often refer to the current period we are navigating as the messy middle. We know our destination, but the roadmap is incredibly complex. As ship owners, we are faced with a monumental dilemma. We must order ships today that will be on the water for the next 20 to 25 years. But which fuel will be the dominant green fuel of the future? Will it be ammonia, methanol, hydrogen, or something else entirely? This creates a staggering investment risk. It is a classic chicken and egg scenario. Ship owners are naturally hesitant to commit billions of dollars to vessels for a fuel that is not yet widely available, while energy producers are hesitant to scale up production without a guaranteed fleet ready to consume it. To navigate this messy middle, we require absolute regulatory clarity. This brings me to the recent MEPC 84, which concluded in London at the beginning of this month. From a ship owner's perspective, the outcomes of MEPC 84 were a mix of relief and lingering frustration. We are, as IMO Secretary General Arsenio Dominguez aptly put it, kind of back on track. The net zero framework survived a significant assault, with a narrow majority of 55 countries supporting the framework and its critical carbon pricing mechanism against 51 who sought to reopen or weaken it. While it is a relief that the framework survived, survival is not a victory. The fact that the adoption of a global regulatory framework remains uncertain, with further intersessional working groups scheduled for September and November before MEPC 85, prolongs the uncertainty that paralyzes our industry. We cannot end up in a cycle of open-ended negotiations. It is vital that governments move towards the adoption of a comprehensive, fit-for-purpose global framework as soon as possible. Without a level playing field and a universal carbon pricing mechanism, we risk regional fragmentation, a patchwork of local regulations that will make global compliance a logistical nightmare. Despite the overarching political hurdles, MEPC 84 did deliver some concrete technical progress that is highly relevant to our discussions today. The committee advanced work on the IMO Lifecycle GHG Assessment Framework, which is absolutely foundational. If we are to transition to alternative fuels, we must have a robust, scientifically sound method for verifying the carbon intensity of a vessel's entire life cycle from well to wake. The agreement to continue refining the LCA treatment for specific technologies, including onboard carbon capture and storage, and the use of mass balance chain of custody models for fuel traceability is a step in the right direction. Furthermore, the adoption of the revised interim guidance on the use of biofuels is a welcome clarification, establishing that the carbon factor for biofuel blends should be calculated as a weighted average by mass, and setting straight sustainability certification criteria provides the guardrails necessary to ensure that biofuels deliver genuine climate benefits rather than unintended environmental harm. As the second part of today's forum will explore, the integrity of marine biofuels is paramount. We cannot afford to replace one environmental problem with another through indirect land use change or fraudulent certification. But what do we do while we wait for these alternative fuels to scale and the regulations to finalize? We cannot simply sit on our hands. This is where maritime energy efficiency technologies, the focus of our first session today, become absolutely critical. A pragmatic step-by-step approach is essential. We must focus on what is achievable right now. Measures such as wind-assisted propulsion systems, hull lubrication, and propeller optimization are readily deployable. They have the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 40% by 2030. The adoption of the Northeast Atlantic Emission Control Area at MEPC 84, alongside the ongoing implementation of the Carbon Intensity Indicator and the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, makes the business case for these technologies stronger than ever. However, the deployment of these technologies must go hand in hand with the second great revolution reshaping our industry, digitalization. For too long, shipping has been reliant on siloed information and manual processes. To truly optimize energy efficiency, we must embrace advanced data analytics. How will we manage a complex global fleet running on multiple different types of new volatile fuels? Through sophisticated data analytics and digital twin models. How will we prove our compliance with CII or the upcoming net zero framework? Through transparent, digitally enabled monitoring and reporting systems. Yet the biggest hurdle to digitalization is the lack of standardization. Every shipping company, every port, and every engine manufacturer currently has its own system of collecting and sharing data. To unlock the true benefits of digitalization, we need to speak the same digital language. We must work together to create common standards for data, ensuring that new technologies are interoperable across the entire supply chain. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges before us are monumental. The transition to net zero is the single greatest test our industry has ever faced, compounded by geopolitical instability and a rapidly shifting technological landscape. No single entity can solve this alone. It demands unprecedented collaboration. Ship owners, charterers, fuel producers, engine manufacturers, financiers, and regulators must work together in a way we never have before. We must share the risks, co-invest in new technologies, and build the commercial framework that make the green transition viable. Institutions like the HKUST has a vital role to play in this ecosystem. By bringing together academia, industry leaders, and policymakers, you are fostering the dialogue and the innovation required to redraw the horizon of the maritime sector. Leading a family business with a long, proud history has taught me that we must respect our legacy while having the courage to adapt to the future. We must build an industry that is not only cleaner and smarter, but also more resilient and more humane. An industry that values and protects the seafarers who keep the world turning. Let us embrace this messy middle, not with fear, but with courage, pragmatism, and a collaborative spirit. Let us use forums like this to forge the partnerships that will propel the maritime world into a sustainable and prosperous new era. Thank you, and I wish you all a highly productive and engaging forum.
Sabrina, thank you so much. This is the voice of leadership, and we are so proud to have you with us at HKUST and representing Hong Kong, both locally and internationally. Thank you for highlighting the plight of the seafarers. For Hong Kong, we saw that in graphic details during COVID. And again, seafarers are having to go through this extraordinarily difficult period. And also, thank you for scoping, really, the overall picture for the shipping industry. We can't have a better summary of what we are all facing. So thank you, Sabrina. And Tim, please also share a few words with us.
Morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Christine and Billy, for the kind invitation to speak this morning, for organising today's conference. And although I promise we haven't collaborated, many of the thoughts that I plan to share this morning are going to be a bit of an echo for what Sabrina has just said. But anyway, you were very kind, Christine, to recognise and remember what we did with the Fair Winds Charter 15 years ago now, in 2011. And although you massively overstated my own role in that, I think what is true about that when I reflect back on it, it was a coming together of the different groups that are necessary to make a change when you've got hard, intractable problems. At that time, Christine was leading Civic Exchange, and she was doing a lot of work publicising the impact that shipping's pollution had on the health of people living in Hong Kong, and proximity to those emissions was a problem. The shipping industry wanted to do something about it, but didn't have an obvious way of progressing. And together we came together, and also with members of the government, talked about establishing a voluntary fuel switch, which we implemented successfully, and then followed on from that with the government's help to make it a legislative, a mandatory change, which came with the 2015 Pollution Act. And I think what it shows, it was a small thing, but it shows how when you're facing complex problems in this area of emissions and decarbonisation, it takes all the stakeholders coming together and collaborating and working together, and then you can achieve some progress. So thank you for remembering it. I think it was a good starting point. We're a long way down the road since then. In the 15 years since, I think there's been a huge amount of progress, actually. And if you'll forgive me, as a 40-year veteran of the industry, I don't want to claim that we've done everything, but I think that shipping has shown many of the right approaches and attitudes in trying to address the global problem of decarbonisation better than many others. So I think we're on the right track. But you will all be aware, and I think Sabrina talked about this as well, the tremendous challenges and headwinds that we've had in the last couple of years, geopolitically, the challenges to trade, the challenges of wars and disruption. There's a lot of things that potentially throw off the shipping industry from continued progress on its journey towards decarbonisation. It would be easy to say, with all these other things going on, you know, why bother with decarb? Why should we continue to work on that? But I think I would like to just share three reflections or three observations at the introduction of today's discussion. The first of them, I think, is at the IMO. We have no choice, but we have to stay the course. It's disappointing that some countries have tried to deflect what was shaping up very well to be an agreed approach, which reflected the wishes of the industry as well as many of the governments around the world. But the most recent meetings at least avoided a disaster. And I think if you look at it, there's still actually a strong commonality between China and the EU in wanting to progress this in the right way. Many of the countries in the global south have the same view, and many of the industry practitioners who are helping to provide the technologies and the capabilities to deliver on the net zero framework also continue to exist it. So I think we've just got to battle on. It's a complex problem. It's a huge challenge. There always are going to be bumps in the road and obstacles. But we need to continue to work at it. We try to get the best deal we can, the most comprehensive, the most globally encompassing, and the most consistent deal we can, avoiding regionalization as much as possible. And we try not to let the aim for perfect to be the enemy of good. And I think that's certainly the attitude that many of us are taking. I think we just have to continue with that thinking. So that's my first observation. The second observation was that irrespective of what the regulatory regime imposes on us, there is still so much that all of us can do as industry practitioners, scientists, manufacturers, governments to actually progress decarbonisation practically on the ground in the interim, in the short term. And that is why it's so important that we continue to have opportunities like we have at today's forum. And again, thank you, Christine and Billy, for arranging it. It's by bringing people together so we can talk about the practical things we can do. And there's no single silver bullet that will resolve decarbonisation in our industry. The things that we're looking at in a company, my own company in Maersk, where we're looking at global solutions for long-haul trades, often with quite large ships, are very different from the sort of solutions that would apply in the short-sea trades or in the ferry business or regional trades or whatever. And different technologies, different solutions can be relevant. So what's really useful is to bring all of the practitioners together, the people that are doing the research and coming up with the new ideas, the new technologies and so on. And all of us continue to think about how we might apply some or all of those to make small incremental changes on our own decarbonisation journey. And that's why we've got to continue to meet and continue to have these discussions, and it's excellent that we're doing that today. So thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what I can learn from all of the subject matter experts and industry colleagues during the course of this morning's workshops as well. And then the third observation I'd wanted to share was a bit closer to home about what is China and more particularly what is Hong Kong's role in this. And when I look at this, I think it's clear that China is rapidly becoming the emerging power as a source of sustainable fuels for the world going forward. Not just for shipping. You've already seen what's happening in terms of electric vehicles and so on, but specifically in shipping as well. China is becoming one of the biggest suppliers of green methanol, of green ammonia, because of China's incredible performance in renewable energy, electricity generation, solar and so on. They have the ability to make these fuels in a way which doesn't cause harm to the planet. China is becoming the leading supplier of battery technologies and other electronic components that link all of these things together and can convert them into motion and to powering specific activities on the ship. So all of that is going on at scale and very close to home for us here in Hong Kong. So there's a role, I think, for Hong Kong to try to be a party that brings all this together and actually makes it available to the world, to the shipping industry. And this is an area where, very specifically, I would like to see the Hong Kong government be very, very ambitious in trying to make Hong Kong the future trading hub for sustainable fuels for Asia. This is more than just about making the physical product available to ships so that they can be refueled in Hong Kong. This is about actually making a trading community for buying and selling sustainable fuels going forward, because that's what we need as the industry. At the moment, historically, conventional fuels have been much, much cheaper than the new fuels. That's changing a bit, funnily enough, with, despite what I would have expected with the Gulf War, because the conventional fuels are now getting much more expensive and we're getting closer to parity for cost for the new fuels. But what we really need is a strong trading community here of buyers and sellers who are competing to source these new fuels and actually try to make them available at cost-effective pricing to all different types of ship operators and users. And this is an area where Hong Kong could easily become the regional leader. If you look at what happened with conventional fuels, Singapore stole a march on Hong Kong. They persuaded some of the big refineries to come and set up in Singapore, and on the back of that, they built a bunker trading industry which dominated the region. For the green fuels, the fuels are coming from China. Hong Kong has a perfect opportunity to grab that trading spot and make itself the trading center for Asia for sustainable fuels going forward. And if we can get the government to help by giving out licenses to traders, if we can encourage entrepreneurial companies to get involved in buying and selling, and if all of us can start to engage with that community to actually buy and source fuels cheaply from suppliers in Hong Kong, we can help to position Hong Kong as the regional hub for green fuels going forward. Good for Hong Kong, good for our economy, but also good for shipping and good for the world. So just some thoughts about an area specifically where Hong Kong might actually be able to be the leader. But once again, thanks very much indeed for arranging today's session, and I'm looking forward to some really interesting conversations. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tim. And may I ask Ms. Sabrina Chow, Tim and Christine, come on stage. We take a photo. Yeah. And then afterward, yeah, we'll ask all the speakers, panelists to join. Okay, can all the speakers and panelists come up? Yeah. Now we move on to our part one. The first speaker, our PhD researcher, Dr. Jiajing Chen. Where are you? Oh, yeah. He will talk, share with us our research findings.
Okay, good morning, distinguished guests. Sabrina, team, Christine, and Billy. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity today here to share you a little bit about our research, as well as some insights and some thinking of our shipping research team. Before move to our research part, I would like to have a very quick welcome back message. Well, it has been a while since our last September volume. So last September, we also we were in the Hong Kong Maritime Museum. We talked about something about energy efficiency technology. Well, the message here I would like to share is, well, first of all, since our September, we see some movement of the global regulatory context here, while following the MEPC 84, despite some movement, but the IMO net zero framework, it remains unsettled, and key details, especially related to greenhouse gas pricing mechanism and global marine fuel standard, is still subject to further negotiation. But actually, this brings the opportunity for the energy efficient technology. As the energy efficiency technology, it brings the near-term, near-term opportunity. It can reduce the emissions now and save the overall fuel consumption. So today we bring everybody here because, well, as the lesson we learned from our volume last September is that, well, to really make the adoption, it is not actually the technology side problem. So last year we visited some stakeholders, and again, thank you so much for helping us with the interview, that we collect so many insightful opinions from all the industry. What we see is that there is a broad interest from industry in terms of the energy efficiency technology, especially what we saw. We saw interest in propulsion efficiency, voyage optimization, and particularly shore power technology. Well, but apart from the interest, the actual barrier, we'd also see that there are some barriers that stop the adoption. For instance, we see stakeholders worrying about infrastructure readiness, technology maturity, policy certainty, and particularly vessel downtime, because we see that, well, let me probably stand here. Well, because we see that ship owners are actually kind of worrying about, because if you put your ship to retrofitting, it means that you have to idle your ship for if days and even months, which cost, it is cost. And among all these challenges, we see that CapEx, the CapEx pressure is the most immediate concern. And that means that we need financial models and to actually drive the adoption, as I just said. And to make the financial models actually works, here we need to have a very concrete and reliable understanding of the actual carbon emission and fuel demand here. And this is where our scientific evidence stands. And I would like to talk a little bit about the Hong Kong and GBA trends here. Well, we all know that Hong Kong is quite well known for its financial services, capital market, maritime services, and all these high value added maritime services. Well, so on the left-hand side, Hong Kong provides the financial side support, and here the GBA city can provide the port shipping activity. GBA cities, it has a large volume of the port and shipping activity, and it has a very good capacity in the infrastructure and shipbuilding side. So combine Hong Kong's advantage and GBA cities, actually the barriers that I just mentioned in the previous slide, well, infrastructure, financial, all these barriers, it is actually the strength of Hong Kong and the broader GBA region. And the most important part is that while we see that global context is kind of unstable, but if GBA region, we work together, we don't need to worry that much about how the overall global landscape changing, but we can just take the lead to push the maritime decarbonization. And here we talk about the overall concept, and let's talk about our scientific evidence. So here, using our maritime big data, well, if you have joined our previous volume workshop before, I think you might know that our division, our Institute for the Environment, our technique is in the maritime big data analytics. So we always use the global AIS activity data to find out some policy implication, where the ship are, where the ship goes, what are the carbon emission, what are the fuel demand. So here is the overall methodology explanation from AIS activity. Here we know the ship's activity, and we know ship's engine. We know how much fuel and emission the fuel is generating. Combine them together, we try to find out what the carbon emissions will be. And I would like to highlight a little bit here is that, well, as you can see here, well, some ship, mostly in Hong Kong and GBA, we know OGV, we know river trade vessel, and we know local vessel. Because based on our experience, what we saw is that most of the local vessel and river trade vessel, we may not know what they are, what type of ship they are. So here we know that AI methodology here is quite advanced. So here we take the advantage of AI. We build a very simple AI model to help us identify what a ship is, and also use AI to help us identify what the possible emission range it will be. And here is some of the result here we have. Well, this is from I know that most of the discussion, IMO, EU nowadays is a life cycle. Well, here we provide a simple result of tank, despite it is tank to waste, a tank to waste CO2 emission estimation. Well, we use the 2025 AIS data. So here, the first thing we can see that is the the blue column here. It refers to the vessel that is whose speed is less than 1 knot, which means that the vessel is stopping at a port. So from this figure, we see the carbon emission from all the vessels in Hong Kong water. What we can see is that actually the emission from hoteling mode, which means either ship is at a berth or anchorage, the emission is quite high. And secondly, another thing is that, by ship type, we see that, as from our estimation, cargo vessel, container vessel, and some of the river trade vessel here, actually they contribute most of the emission here. And we also see a clear pattern that while the emission characteristic, it varies among different ship type. For instance, for container vessel, here we see that actually the emission of container ship at the maneuvering mode. Maneuvering mode here means that the ship is slowing at a very slow speed. So this might be due to the port conjunction or the traffic jam and inefficiency of the overall port operation. So the container, it can only move in a very slow speed at the terminal region. And for the local vessel here, some small vessel, fishing vessel, while the overall emission pattern, it is quite different. So what we can learn, despite it is a kind of a simple emission analysis. So what we can see here is that, another very important point I forgot to mention is that, despite we have AI to help us, we still see that, for the unidentified vessel, that means we don't know what type of vessel it is. Despite AI help us to solve most of the problem, still there are 20% of the vessel we don't know what they are. So overall, the emission analysis here, it leads us to a broader discussion and thinking that, first of all, the unidentified vessel pointing to the discussion of trusty data and verification problems. So it is very important for us to understand the overall picture of the emission to really know what are these unidentified vessels are. And secondly, the high hoteling emission here, the blue column, it brings the discussion of onshore power back. So in Hong Kong, probably we can think that there would be a good potential of the application of onshore power. So we can reduce, potentially reduce all the blue column here. And thirdly, Hong Kong GBA activity. Well, that's why we didn't show the result here. The we see activity and emission from between voyages between Hong Kong and other GBA cities, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and also Zhuhai. So these intra-GBA corridors, they have potential to become a mini green shipping corridor. And again, point to the Hong Kong GBA collaboration that I just mentioned. We don't need to worry too much about the overall global landscape. So within the GBA, we can already have something. I mean, there are something we can do already. And last but not the least, different vessels here. The difference among different ship types, we see that. The implication we saw here is that probably for different ship type, we might have, for the energy efficiency technology or other thing, we can consider tailored methodology or tailored improvement, not only from a ship type perspective, maybe from even a single ship perspective to improve the energy efficiency. Well, and another important message here is that, well, as you can see, the shipping decarbonization, it is kind of a complex problem that needs regional collaboration, needs technology, needs verification, financial support and verification. Well, these are interdisciplinary subjects. So it is very important to bring everything together and have a unified study and research. So it is something like an advertisement here. Well, we are very lucky and fortunate that this year our shipping team here, we have got this support from the Chief Executive's Policy Unit. We get this research project titled Enhancing Hong Kong's Status as a Green Maritime Hub, an integrated study of strategic green port measures. So the overall idea is that we try to think of the shipping decarbonization problem from a unified perspective to combine and think of everything together, to translate Hong Kong's green shipping and green bunkering policy vision into a concrete, implementable strategy. So our project here, it covers greenfield bunkering demand and two, frontier green measurement. One is green shipping corridor I just mentioned, and another one is the onshore power supply. And while my previous discussion was tank-to-weight basis, but here we had life cycle greenhouse gas emission estimation, but here we'll try to better refine the overall emission and reanalysis whole life cycle greenhouse emission. And here, I think this is potentially one of the most important part, the certification governance framework to help government understand how to governance all the stakeholders and how to make the certification market active here in Hong Kong, and combine the three aspects here to consolidately analyze how to position Hong Kong in a better competitive position against no matter regional competitors, Singapore or global competitors. Well, I think this is all of my presentation. Well, despite, as Christine mentioned, the weather is not that good today, but hope you're enjoying our volume today and you can learn some new insights in our UST campus. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jiajing. Our second speaker is Mr. Patrick Banks, is Kongsberg Maritime. Yes, please. Patrick came all the way from Norway, and we have pleasure to also Singapore.
So not so far. Yeah. Thank you. Pointer, button, and press. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Very, very pleased to be here. Yep, from Singapore. Our company is from Norway, so I can understand the confusion, and maybe I look a bit, but actually I'm from Australia as well. But Kongsberg Maritime, we are a global technology equipment provider for marine customers and solutions for those vessels. Myself, I'm Patrick. I'm looking after sales for APAC. Of course, you might detect a bit of a sales element to these slides, but it's not really the purpose I'm here for. I'm here to show you technologies that are available, but also to participate and to listen and to give the perspective from a technology or equipment provider, because as we see, there's so many stakeholders involved, and of course the technology providers is just one of those stakeholders. So it's important to have everyone's perspective, as we've already heard from the previous speakers, which is very interesting. I will be quick and just explain the portfolio of Kongsberg Maritime, just to give you some context. We are mission critical equipment suppliers. We work with all of the equipment from bridge, automation control systems, energy equipment, deck machinery, propulsion, stabilization. So almost the entire mission critical equipment portfolio we can provide. And in particular, in the top right there is top right is digital solutions as well, which we're getting involved with. But of course, we want to talk about energy efficient technologies. So I'm going to show you some of the energy efficient technologies that are in the market today, or that are quite common. And then we'll dive a bit deeper into wind assisted propulsion, which is a bit more, or quite an interesting technology. A very common, relatively quick and easy, let's say, is changing the propulsion, particularly once the vessel's changed its operating speed from its design speed. So if the vessel is, say, 5 or 10 or 15 years old, it would have been designed to sail at a certain speed. And with a lot of the EEXI and those type of CII rating regulations coming in, the first thing to do was to reduce the vessel speed. And once you reduce the vessel speed, then the propulsion, the propeller, usually the fixed pitch propeller, is not operating at its designed efficiency level. So therefore it became a kind of a very quick and easy solution to get significant efficiency gains by changing the propeller. So you can do fixed pitch propellers changing, ProMass Light, which is more of an integrated propeller with the rudder. So we're moving the disturbed water flow from the propeller, which used to be running into the rudder, and you move that disturbed water flow beyond the rudder. And we see significant improvements in that integrated rudder and propeller. It's only for a certain amount of vessels that have an inline rudder, but still it's an important technology. And then there's some additional things, energy regaining caps, and these type of ones on the other side. Yeah, these smaller ones, which usually just are in addition to some major propulsion. We've delivered over about 150, so we have a good database of performance. The ROI is typically within 2 years, but of course there's a huge range of efficiency improvements that's shown there. Typically, maybe 8%, 10%, 12%. Those are the figures that we see. Rarely do we see higher though, but for specific vessels, passenger and cruise and those things, they can get higher levels. Power limitation, load optimization, these are very quick and easy. A lot of customers have already gone with this. It's a matter of updating the control system really to ensure that the engine is limited by the amount of fuel, so that equals a speed reduction, and load optimization, so smart control systems ensuring that the engine stays within its or closer to its designed load position. Complementary measures, again over here, this is really important as well as talking about the propulsion system. As soon as you change the vessel's design speed or the speed of the vessel away from its design speed, it starts to run very inefficiently, and particularly the propeller. So we see really low-hanging fruit to change the propeller and get back, say, 6-7% efficiency, no problem. Electrification is happening more and more. This is kind of changing from traditional shaft-driven propulsion to perhaps diesel electric, or gives you much more flexibility in the system. Shaft generators, and I'll talk a little bit more about shaft generators a bit later, but certainly an interesting an advancing technology which gives you much more flexibility in how you're using energy on the ship. Battery storage systems are not so much popular for merchant, but offshore has been quite popular, and shore connections as well is another electrification technology that, if you saw from the previous presenter, there's a huge amount of emission through being alongside from the hotel load. So shore power connections certainly very popular as well. And alternative fuels. We have fuel gas supply systems which are very popular, very much in the new build, not so much in the aftermarket. It's expensive to add in dual fuels, but certainly you need a safe and reliable system that manages the delivery of the fuel, and these fuels can be hazardous, and it's not such a straightforward process to just switch to a dual fuel. So it's a lot more complicated than it seems. Wind-assisted propulsion, I'll focus more on from the next slide. Alternative fuels and fuel cells, of course, you know, they're being talked about. It's been mentioned already, yes, it's really interesting. I think from our perspective as a technology provider, we don't align with any fuels. We don't align with any wind-assisted propulsion providers. We don't align with any one technology. But what we do say is that using less of whatever fuel you've got is the smarter way forward in terms of fuels getting more expensive, whether it's traditional fuels or new fuels. You'd expect that the price goes up. So using less of it is really important. So we just focus on wind-assisted propulsion a little bit. I just checked before. I think there's at least 100 vessels either with wind-assisted propulsion installed or on the order books. And I think in 3 or 4 years, this is expected to grow to like 400, 500. There's a strong business case for wind-assisted propulsion. I'll show you why. So it's down here. And this is more from a retrofitting perspective, but you can see cost effectiveness, so dollars per tonne of CO2 equivalent saved. Say low-hanging fruit, adjusting bulbous bow, hull coatings, ballast systems. It's kind of down with those systems in terms of value for money. Alternative fuels at this stage, and this chart's a little bit old and the fuel prices are changing all the time, so maybe not super accurate, but of course it's very expensive to change to an existing vessel to a green fuel. But in terms of installation, retrofit, it's relatively straightforward. They go on the deck. There's not a lot of, let's say, mechanical integration that has to happen with these wind-assisted propulsion units. So it makes sense in a lot of ways. The selection of the wind-assisted propulsion, there's at least kind of 5 or 6 different families of technology when it comes to wind-assisted propulsion. As most kind of marine people understand, that the selection of propulsion equipment is critical. And of course, the selection of wind-assisted propulsion equipment we are seeing is also very critical. Well, 5 minutes left. All right, so that is because, so the selection of all of these different wind-assisted propulsion devices should be based on the operating profile the geographical profile and the operating profile of the vessel, which you can then generate a wind direction rows and wind speed probability chart, which you can then add into the decision making. And for this case study, we had it was chosen for rotor sails to go onto this case study that we chose. This was another case study we did. This is a transatlantic route, and again, assessing that the transit path, you can see the prevailing winds. And for this vessel, 2 types of wind-assisted propulsion was chosen. This is the thrust plot from so the thrust generated from a wind-assisted propulsion device, and you can see here, this is the thrust required to generate push the vessel at 12.5 knots. You can see in these situations here actually that all of the propulsion required is coming from the wind-assisted devices. This I'll talk about a bit more. So this is a bit about once you convert the thrust that you're getting from the wind-assisted propulsion into ETA and ETDs and the commercial requirements of the vessel, things become a bit more different, and I'll talk about that soon. 5 minutes feels short. Did I have 15 minutes or 10? 15 minutes long. Sorry, I'm talking too long. Okay, so what happens with wind-assisted devices when they're installed? Of course, they generate a huge amount of thrust. There's a large amount of thrust that can be generated, but they don't just put it in the right direction. There's a lot of side thrust that comes in as well. So what happens then is the sails are trying to turn the vessel. And then the rudder needs to be, we need to put more rudder on to correct the course of the ship. And then the rudder is then dragging on the ship. So immediately you can see that needs to be balanced. You can't just have the wind-assisted propulsion pushing the ship as hard as possible and the rudder taking away most of the energy. So that needs to be balanced. Also what happens is the propeller starts to run too lightly, and then your engine is not running in its optimum level. So if you've got a controllable pitch propeller, you can add on more pitch. Engine still running with too low a load, then you can add in the shaft generator and drag and pull some more power from the shaft generator. Too much, you're generating too much hotel power, then you can put power into the batteries. Batteries are full, put power back into the propulsion system and the vessel increases. You can see what's happening, but this is happening constantly being monitored and updated. Put more power back into the propeller, vessel goes faster, but the vessel arrives too early at port. You need to recalculate the energy plan for the voyage. So integrating this into the entire operation of the vessel is critical, and understanding the entire journey. The variables such as wind and currents and waves are going to affect the ETA, and we need to constantly update those. So by using this K-sail technology, which is not the sails itself, it's the integration of the sails. So yeah, I'm a bit short of time here. For these 3 case studies we were able to get, you can see the improvement from the savings, almost 60-70% improvement in this case as well. So by integrating the wind-assisted propulsion into all the systems in the vessel, that's the key message, that you can get significant additional efficiency improvement. The challenge here was to keep this vessel within CII rating compliance for the life of the ship without using any different fuel. And we looked at all the technologies available. We chose 2 suction wings and rotor sails. So again, that analysis of the vessel and then choosing the right equipment. CPs and hybrid shaft generators are critical. A lot of the wind-assisted propulsion, such as rotor sails, is a power consumer actually. So often need to run your auxiliary gensets to run the power for those. So yeah, you can see at this project we ended up with a 56% savings from the reference case. I'm already out of time, so I'm going to have to... You'll have to look at these at the afterwards. But yeah, the idea is removing the auxiliary gensets from the switchboard and save a huge amount of money and fuel and maintenance costs and all sorts of things. And even initially when you build the vessel, if you have these systems in mind already, then you don't have to even buy the auxiliary gensets. Yeah, just understanding the full scope of the vessel. And just one more slide, sorry. This is more about a fleet-wide approach. We're looking to partner with customers so we can understand what is the best approach. It may not be every vessel, but some vessels are going to benefit more than others, so we can take that overview with the customers. Certainly looking from as a partnership perspective rather than just a seller. We want to be able to work hand in hand with customers to try and solve this issue. That's all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Patrick. And now we have the first speaker, Sean. Sean Balani. He's Director of Projects of Global Center of Maritime Decarbonization. He also came from Singapore.
Thank you very much, Billy. Thank you, Christine, for the invite as well. I won't contradict, Tim, your remarks at the start about the friendly competition between Hong Kong and Singapore. I think GCMD, although we are based in Singapore, we operate globally and internationally, and so we're more than happy to contribute to an event like this and share our learnings. So I'm talking a bit about our fund for energy efficiency technologies, but to set some context, on energy efficiency technologies, I will echo actually much of what you said, Sabrina, at the start, because I was furiously taking some notes while you spoke and shaking my head, perhaps you saw. But I really enjoyed hearing about how you discussed the need and building commercial business case behind energy efficiency technologies, but also the need for risk sharing. Because we recognize that risk sharing still exists and risk still exists with energy efficiency technologies. In fact, Patrick, just now in your slides, I enjoyed them very much, but I saw some of the ranges of savings from 3% to nearly 30%. It's tremendously difficult to build a business case behind something that could pay back 10 times longer than you potentially expect. And so we see this with things like wind assistance. This is an example of a project we've been working on, but also with other high capex equipment like air lubrication, where it highly depends on the vessel's routes and the weather of the day. And that is something that's very hard to control for most vessels operating in spot markets or for long periods. And it tremendously affects the payback of that device. It's also incredibly hard to measure the performance. When we integrate these technologies, perhaps multiple at the same time, we can see vessels' improvement in CII scores, for example, but to distill that to a specific investment case of one technology is still very challenging. And Sabrina, you also mentioned the importance of robust methodologies behind that, and so that's also a little bit of what I'll talk about. And also the business case is actually further weakened by things like split incentives, where charterers may benefit from fuel savings, but ship owners are expected to pay for the upgrades. And also the legalities around securities on mortgage and third-party investments. So I believe it cannot be understated how important regional measures are in this current period of uncertainty with the IMO. What's on the left-hand side is the targets that exist set in the 2023 strategy for us to reach a 2030 indicative checkpoint for the industry. And what we see in the industry between 2008 and the last year of data available, 2024, shipping's emissions have roughly stayed the same. So those are the two red bars around 650, 700 million tons of CO2. That's despite a growth in the fleet of around 37%. And so it means it's been matched roughly by efficiency gains. However, between now and 2030, just 5 years, we need another 30% efficiency gain to meet that kind of target. Of course, green fuels will play a role there too, but we recognize that they're not at scale available in 2030. That's a huge challenge. And so we need to look at every potential energy efficiency technology. We need to be looking at those which have risky business cases, which have high cost in order to meet this. And on the right-hand side, this is an example of the impact of regional measures. In this case, it's the EU ETS and Fuel EU Maritime, which begins to bite, which begins to have cost implications on operators, and therefore potential additional savings that energy efficiency technologies can generate. While I'm talking about costs here in a purely like a carbon tax perspective, actually this kind of thing also applies to regulations in the finance world. So taxonomies, the EU taxonomy, the Southeast Asia taxonomy, these also have a potential upside for investment cases. We think the finance gap is huge to meet these targets. We think it's around $20 billion, and that's taking some conservative estimates on which vessels could be retrofit with either wind assistance or air lubrication in order to meet that 2030 target. And if we look at the global fleet, there's a tremendous spike around new building in 2008, which we know, and it's been matched, or it's building up again in recent years. But there is a huge and relatively old fleet on the water, consuming a lot of fuel, contributing a lot of emissions, which are fantastic targets for retrofits, because they will continue to operate for the next few years, particularly as we're seeing new build prices extremely high. It's spread across the different kinds of vessel types, and we've highlighted just a few of them here, but there's potential across all types of vessels. To put some numbers to what we see, particularly with wind assistance and air lubrication, we're talking 70-odd ships with wind assistance, 200 with air lubrication, compared to a potential market of 20,000. So it's a drop in the ocean of where we could go. And so to address all these risks and to bring in finance that can support this, we have been working for the last 3 years on what we call pay-as-you-save. And so this is a risk-sharing financial mechanism which can absorb some of that risk from that ship owner, some of that unknown payback period, some of that volatility that comes with saving, and share it together with a finance mechanism. So pay-as-you-save depends on two things critically. What is the savings, and then who pays for them? What is the savings is that problem that we discussed earlier with digitalization, with methodologies. And so we've been working on 4 different projects. I have some graphs to show you about how we think we can actually identify the particular savings being generated by these technologies and really zoom into what they are generating back to that business case. We need a few things for that to be possible. Of course, high-frequency data and a strong digital setup is the fundamental layer that cannot be ignored, but also that standard methodology, statistical analysis also has to come in. And then once we have that, we move over to the finance world again and think, if we've quantified the savings, we haven't necessarily taken that risk away. It's still volatile. It will still depend on weather. But how do we deal with that through financial mechanisms? And there we've been working with what we call this capital stack, essentially different kinds of investors that exist, different kinds of capital providers who all have a different level of risk and expect different levels of rewards, and kind of combining them together into what we call a blended finance model to redistribute that risk at the end. So I'm an engineer, actually, and although I talk about finance, I love graphs like this, so please bear with me for a moment. This is an example from the vessel you saw in the picture. It's an EPS MR tanker. It's fitted with 3 wind assistant sails. We have undertaken a program of on-off testing, where for 1 hour, we turn those sails off for 30 minutes and then back on for 30 minutes. And we do that so that we can really identify what the savings are coming from that particular system at that particular time. And so we generate graphs like this with that fantastic high-frequency data, and we zoom into 2 critical things. So what you see on this graph is 30 minutes where the system is off, and then 30 minutes where it's on. And I'll draw your attention to the dark blue line and the orange line. The dark blue line represents the engine power being delivered. So we maintain the RPM of the engine, but we see a natural decrease. It's easier for the engine to match that speed because there's additional thrust coming from the wind assistance. And at the same time, we see the vessel's speed naturally increase. Once again, there's additional thrust. I actually think about this like riding a bike. If you're going slightly up a hill, you have to work a bit harder, your legs have to push a bit harder, and naturally it's a bit slower. But if you start going down the hill, of course, even if you maintain your leg speed, it's easier on your legs and your bike speeds up. That additional gravity effect is similar to what we see with the wind assistance. So this gives us a snapshot. In this particular case, it was about 200 kilowatts of savings at that exact time for that exact wind condition. That's only useful if you can put it together into many different wind conditions and look at the effect over a range of time. So over a 4-month testing program, we carried about 200 of these tests. We plot them on this statistical distribution. Once again, the engineers in the room, I hope you'll appreciate this. But it gives us a very good sense of what the typical performance is. But more than that, when we move on to the polar chart, similar to what we saw in the last presentation, we can articulate how the system performs in different wind conditions that the ship experiences. So this shows a polar chart. If the vessel is heading towards 0 degrees, the wind direction is coming from anywhere 0 to 360, and as we move out on that graph, it's the wind speed. And what this shows us, plotted purely from the tests that we've carried out, no hypothetical, no theoretical design considerations, purely from the test data, we see what kind of force or thrust the wind assistance technology is producing for different wind conditions. And so this is a very data-driven, very analytical method for us to be able to quantify the savings, but it means we can distill this down to minute-level granularity. For any minute that the ship is operating, we can look up this map, we can say what the wind conditions are, and we can definitively say what the kind of savings are being generated from that system. So once we know what the savings are with pay-as-you-save, we then can try to deploy this. So of course, quantification of savings comes through that analytical methodology. That's the critical piece. And for anyone interested, we have a paper out on this, which I'd be more than happy to talk about later as well. And then we need to bring in that finance piece, that blended portfolio, that capital stack. This, by the way, is another vessel we've been working on. It's actually a Hong Kong flag, but it's a container vessel, one which we often hear is not suitable for wind assistance, although it does have two sails on the front in this case. And so when we bring this together with the finance community, we do two things. Two things are critically important: blended finance and project diversification. So individually, any ship savings, it might still be volatile. If the ship is stuck in port or sailing in a non-windy condition, as much as we can quantify those savings, they will still be low. And that's not good for the business case. But when you start to stack up those projects together and you put them in a pool, a finance pool, it smoothens out. Some projects perform very well, some have exposure to regional measures, some may not be performing very well at that particular time, they may have downtime, they may have port issues, for example. But that risk can be mitigated by stacking them on top of each other. And so this is just an illustrative example of 4 projects, and you can see they all have different distributions. Essentially, that you can think of that as what the savings look like over a period of 7 years. And so some of them are very quite clear and well-performing, so the high peaks and quite narrow distributions, that's quite predictable, good performance. Some may be, of course, a bit less. But as we stack them together and we accumulate the savings from multiple projects at the same time, it allows us to distribute that through this waterfall of different investors. Senior debt providers are typically very risk averse. They give you money, they want that money back on a fixed schedule at a fixed amount. And so fine, we pay them off first. We can deal with that. One of the high performing projects is probably good enough. And then we move down that waterfall as other project savings come in. We start to talk to preferred equity providers. These are also ones which want to be paid off pretty quickly, but are naturally willing to take a bit more risk. They may have sustainability agendas, they may be government-backed. These kind of investors are not so uncommon in the world. And then we look at commercial equity, those who expect higher rewards but are willing to take on a lot more risk. They're happy to be looking towards the projects which are the super high performers but quite rare to be paid off. And of course, then there's even a concessional layer, catalytic equity. In our fund, it's GCMD ourselves which play this role, where these are the ones who kickstart the mechanisms and provide that first loss capital. If something really goes wrong, they get hit because they're the end of the waterfall. But by coming in at that layer, they enable all the rest to come in ahead of them. So one thing I wanted to mention when we bring this all together, this pay-as-you-save, the statistical analysis, this wonderful stack of projects, how do we actually execute this through a commercial fund? We went down this route of a leasing platform. A leasing platform is critically important in the world of third-party finance on board ships. because the legality of investing in a ship which already has a mortgage is fraught with difficulty. The original bank who has that mortgage will take all that equipment if that vessel gets seized, and they expect the value of all that equipment. Anyone choosing to invest in a retrofit on top of that is potentially at risk. We could go down the route of trying to do complicated intercreditor mortgages or secondary mortgages, but lawyer fees were honestly far more expensive than the equipment, so we decided not to. Instead, we've adopted a leasing platform. So the fund owns equipment on paper and then leases it back to ship owners for a defined period. We then have that catalytic equity, which takes that potential first loss piece and crowds in additional 6 layers of 6 times the amount of capital. And then we brought that together with our mechanism, our methodology, which is being independently verified of how we quantify savings. And so we did that together on what we call FEAT. It's not the most attractive name, but it's relatively catchy. FEAT is the Fund for Energy Efficiency Technologies. It's in its pilot phase. It's a $35 million fund that we set up with different partners. So GCMD, we are that catalytic piece at the start, and we are there to bring in others. Commercial equity is provided by a fund manager based in Singapore with us, and they have a very typical appetite to many commercial equity providers in the world. The Development Bank of Japan brings a different regional perspective. So as I mentioned, they have development banks and multilaterals. They have a sustainability mandate. And so funds and investments which can both achieve returns, but also benefit the industry and benefit the decarbonization goals are tremendously important. And of course, with ING and DBS, these are 2 banks with a lot of shipping background to provide that senior debt. This is our mechanism for operating pay-as-you-save. It's how we provide these leases to the ship owners. It's how we work with equipment providers as well to provide this leasing platform. And it's, as I mentioned, just getting started in our early pilot phase. And I'm more than happy to discuss this, particularly with any ship owners who'd be looking at these investments in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The part 1, the last speaker is Mr. Logan Lau. Yeah, Logan. He came from Shenzhen, next to us. He will talk about elaborating another way of quantifying the emission reduction or fuel savings. Yeah. We can see that we have the energy technologies, we have the finance aspect, how to fund it, and we have more technical side, how to review the performance.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Logan from CMMI, which serves as CMMI's Head Research Institute in Shenzhen. And it's a great honor to come here, share with you the ship performance and efficiency. And now I will present you the VTI project. Number 1 is a background. It's one of the initial projects of Smart Carbon Reduction Consortium in 2024. And on the left, it's CMMI, it's a solution integrator. And on the right, the CMES is an end user. And in the middle, DNV is a performance verifier. So we'll work on the GIP about VTI and the WAPS. Number 2, it's about a core function, greenhouse gas win-win platform. And for our owner, they focus on technology investment and the ship maintenance. And for the charter, we focus on high efficiency vessel to reduce fuel consumption. For yacht, focus on the innovative technology applications. And for data, they just increase business value and promote sensor and data technologies. For the OEM, it can focus on equipment and service with ongoing third-party certification. We developed the win-win greenhouse gas performance platform and an open, credible, and dynamic system. There are dual assessment at ship and equipment. It conducts both ship level and equipment level. On the left, it's a ship level with a manifold, wind, waves, and water. And on the left, it's a equipment level. We can support on-off and energy-saving equipment, and the efficiency model, and the consumption baseline, and actual value. Then comparison through data analysis, and then finally give out the report and the maintenance advice. Number 3, it's a plan based on 2 applications of actual vessel. In the last year, last June, we made a kickoff, and then last October, we created the VTI system. Now, this March, we finished the part about the sea trail and the delivery. And soon, we will make a sea trail PCTC and delivery. So we will provide a one-stop energy efficiency check from whole ships down to single components. The progress, the Barker layers full class certification. This is a window of the VTI system. So you can see that the VTI is often value greater than or equal to 1. And for software, we created the target ship model and best power model. It's the P0, it's a baseline. And the total ship efficiency model. And for hardware, wave reader data. And this is a wave field. And with some the historical curve. We have get the functional verification review by DNV. And number 2, it's about the PCTC. Now we have finished the guidelines and the standards analysis, 100%. And the optimization of the cell control strategy, 8%. And the construction of a cell energy efficiency evaluation model, 50%. And this is a core function economic calculation strategy. We start at the red point 2, and when open the cell, it's reaches the green P1, and so you can see that from P3 to P2, it's the power saving. So the XI is a negative value, means power saving. Number 5, it's about the VTI-driven application promotion. We want to solve the key pain points. There are five use cases, and the number 1 is verify the VTI for cleaning decisions, and number 2, verified and dynamical fuel tables, and number 3, share fuel tables with the weather router, and number 4, performance transparency statement, and the ship owners and the charterers can sharing the risk and the reward. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Logan. Now we have a panel discussion led by Christine. We have previous speakers to be the panelists. May I invite Christine and Patrick, Sean, Logan, and also there's Illinois. Yeah, Illinois.
35 minutes. Okay, terrific. So let me dive straight into it. Being a generalist and coming from the legal and finance area, I appreciate what you said, especially Shane, about the engineering side, because I work with a lot of engineers. But somehow we have to try and understand each other. So I guess what we're really, the focus of what we can talk about today is there's a lot of technology, there's new technology. I think integration is really important, but how can we really get things deployed? I think that's one of the issues we want to talk about. So instead of starting with people who have already spoken, perhaps I can go to Daniel and Eleanor. In terms of having heard from the other speakers, how do we get it going? You know, sales, other kind of integrating different types of technology. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, I think for the new energy efficiency technologies integration to the ships, for the new building projects, it's very easy and not take too much time, because it can be designed at the very beginning. But for the existing ship retrofitted to with these new technologies, the first stage for the designing and for the flexibility and the capability on the retrofitted ship is very important. As we can see, we have done some research for the different energy efficiency technologies installed on the existing ship. Actually, the time for the shipyard to do the cutting or construction work or the later commissioning, it's very short time, only maybe 1 month or many weeks. But the previously designed stage will take a long time, maybe 5 to 6 months. This is very important. And also the feasibilities is also very important, because some of the technologies installed on the board, it is that might be cause some later problems which will be not recognized at the very beginning. Take a wind propulsion system as an example. I think we all saw the news last year. In one of the Chinese port, Qingdao port, there is a very large oil carrier which was installed 5 rotor sails on the port side of the ship. But due to the design and the rotor sails has some intervention with mooring bollard. So this ship cannot be berthed at the port side. So for this reason, the ship has need to turn around and berth at the starboard side. This will take some time and also cause some problem. So I think the integration of the new energy efficiency technologies at the beginning, from the design stage, the assessment stage is very important. It's better to try to dig every aspect of that might be the problems that might be happened in the future. This is very important. Yes.
Thank you. Eleanor, from a ship manager's point of view at Caravel, how do you look at all of this?
Sure, let me share 2 points. Now, first thing, it has to work for your ship, right? So your pre-retrofit baseline is really important. You remember the graphs that Sean has shown earlier, they're lovely engineering graphs. You know, you need to understand your ships. What's your fuel consumption beforehand, your weather normalization data, how it all fits together, and how the technology fits your vessel rather than the other way around. And without that information, you're not going to be able to quantify some of these savings and actually share those with your owners, your charterers, and have the financial negotiations going on. And the second point is the people. The graphs that Sean showed earlier, those lovely, lovely engineering graphs. I'm an engineer too, so I'm fascinated by these graphs. They need people to understand how to log that data. Your technology only works if the people who are running your ships understand what's going on, understand when to turn on the systems, when to turn off the systems, how to maintain the systems, how to log the data accurately, what are the kind of data we're looking for when we're doing these pilots. And you do that, you need to train your crews, your seafarers, so that they understand, okay, now is a good time, the weather's great, okay, turn off for half an hour, turn on for half an hour. We need to be able to let them know, let them aware of what's the purpose of the wind-assisted propulsion systems or any energy efficiency technologies that we've installed, and how they're going to help us analyze the situation. What they're doing is really important, and train them so that they are confident in running these efficiencies.
So what you're really saying is, you know, if you're a ship manager, a ship owner, you really need to understand this whole chain of events. I mean, you know, we have these new technologies, very interesting. Let's say you're prepared to spend a lot of money, you know, on them, but you also need to get your workforce, right, to kind of know what to do. So what kind of training are ship managers and ship owners doing?
Sure, let me put this into context. There are a lot of things you can do with trainings, right? We have superintendents in our offices. We have crew seafarers at sea. Both of them need to be trained because they need to work together to inform owners so that owners can talk to their charterers and have those financial negotiations and understand what the savings really are. And training comes in several phases, right? Pre getting on board the ships, we train our seafarers so that they understand when they're getting on board what is to be expected. Our superintendents understand what they need to manage, how they're going to manage the ship, how they're going to manage the crew. If the crew have questions, how they're going to answer them, or how do we work with the vendors to make sure that the maintenance is going okay, that we are optimizing the equipment fully. And we also do onboard training. We install VDRs on board so that we can track the performance of the vessel. And that's really important because that enables us to give feedback afterwards. So with that feedback, we know where the seafarers, our crews, are doing really well, and we congratulate them. We say, well done, and where we can work together to improve what we can do in the next voyage. And all this data is really important because like we've heard earlier on, all this weather normalization, good weather, bad weather, it really changes your CII, it changes how the systems are working on board. And without that training, it's very difficult to quantify that data and have that verifiable, auditable data that everybody is looking for. It's really important when it comes to sort of ROIs and financial models, if you can't audit your data, you can't verify where that data is coming from, and not everybody is on board or aligned on, okay, we agree, we turn off during good weather, we turn off during bad weather, or however you want to set that metric, nobody's going to agree on the table, right? You have to align on what is the data that everybody will agree on, saying, okay, this is the kind of data that we will say 100% the saving is coming from the wind systems, or this is coming from normal variation when you're at sea.
Right. I guess, Patrick's good time to come back to you. Love the graphics and, following from Eleanor, the integration, the sexiness of the sales, but there'll be more new things coming out, or these other, perhaps less boring, but equally important new bits of technology. I mean, how can you help her to kind of fit it all together, give her the information that she needs?
Yeah, I mean, part of what the systems we're providing is also part of the analysis and verification and those type of things. So we certainly play a part in that, but it's as the biggest challenge is the finance side of things, and ship management. What role do they play in that part of the capex to put the equipment on the vessel? We've got some very compelling business cases for equipment that we can't even give away, because the desire, and you saw some of the figures on the screen where it's maybe 5 to 25% or something like that, but we can basically guarantee 15 to 20% and an ROI of under 2 years, and there's still no interest. So it kind of it makes us think that what's happening here, what's going on. We've got something that works. It's us pushing. There's no pull from the other side, and okay. So regulation is one thing, and we're all of course hoping that regulation comes in and just solves this issue and forces everyone to come to the table. But different. I was really interested to see your presentation before around different finance models and finding something that fits, because we've all got shareholders. We've all got. We can't do things out of goodwill. It just doesn't work. So to sit around and expect that goodwill will drive or get us anywhere near it is not going to happen. We have to take all the stakeholders and understand what they are required to do for their shareholders. And for us as a technology provider, we can't just snap our fingers and make a new technology. It takes a huge amount of investment and R&D. And when there's no certainty around that this equipment is taken up, so we didn't get involved in wind-assisted propulsion devices. Perhaps we should have, but we didn't. We stood back because we didn't know what would kind of win out. And it takes a lot of investment to do those things. So, and there's lots of things that, so maybe I've gone a bit off track. But certainly like...
Very honest, right? Very honest. But perhaps for those of you in the audience, I'll come back and ask you, right? Why can't he give stuff away? But we'll come back to that later.
Sure.
Shane, maybe I can come to you. I mean, you've really kind of touched on this point. And building trust, I mean, you're trying to... for Patrick, for example, I mean, you're trying to assure customers that it works, but somehow they're still not parting with the money. And I guess if you don't have to, I mean, owners might say, I prefer the money in my pocket for now, right? So, but you're trying to push the envelope. You're now coming up with a new pay-as-you-save scheme, which is like a performance contracting type of contract. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, who are you having joy with and who you're not having joy with?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I would actually echo these thoughts, because these projects are not trivial. Installing wind assistance, air lubrication, it's still complicated. 6 months for a class approval, a few weeks in a dry dock, complicated integration system, crew training that needs to go alongside, superintendent training. It's not a plug-and-play solution. So I think where we see the appetite, it's definitely the bigger owners who have performance teams in-house who can do those kind of assessments themselves. those who are both owners and operators of their vessel, because they would both invest and enjoy the savings. It needs a compelling argument to make for a small ship owner, for example. The container vessel that I had on the screen, for example, that wind assistance, it was purchased by the charterer, ONE. The vessel's owned by a small ship owner. They own 4 vessels, and their crew is managed by a separate third-party manager, also a small company based in the Philippines. The crew are 2 steps removed from where that investment was, and at the very start of that project, we saw utilization of that sales around 2%. So 1/50th of the time we think it should be working is when it was working. And it was all these challenges. It was the crew unfamiliar with these technologies. It was concerns about stability and roll, even though the calculations said it's no problem. It's just still new technology, and it's still, there's a lot of friction in adopting these things. So I think as much as pay as you save, we hope that can help with the finance piece, and we hope that integrating this performance assessment as part of that also helps address that barrier. I think crew training and the human element and a system design is also critically important. It needs to mature a little bit as well. Many of the manufacturers are still quite new, quite small companies, so there is some maturing to do in the industry.
I guess apart from the big players, there are SMEs or smaller, medium-sized players, and how do we perhaps persuade them, right, to part with their money? But we'll come back to that point later. Logan, I mean, your VTI, I mean, you're trying to contribute, again, to verification, efficiency, and so on. Perhaps you could, you're doing it in China, right? You're working with partners. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. About our VTI system, it displays the true energy efficiency after accounting for the environmental influences such as wind, waves, and currents. And first, the VTI baseline, the baseline data is obtained by interpolating the ship model test and the trial results, and then dynamically calibrated with using the real-time data. For example, by reconstructing the wave field from the wave point clouds, and enabling multi-dimensional regression analysis and trend forecasting. Give an example. If a newly built ship has an VTI value of 1.0, and then after a long time it reaches 1.5, and now the system may immediately recommend the optimal cleaning advice. So the ship owners and charterers can both benefit from the shared performance data. Okay.
Thank you. Well, perhaps I can open up to the floor. Any comments from owners not parting with your money, your trust issues, technical issues? Because the technology is there, and actually you're also saying it really works. Crew training is really important, because I think you need the whole system, right? People at the top management as well as your seafarers to know what to do so that you can optimize the savings that are available. But money and engineering seems to be two completely different subjects, right? So I'm just wondering, people here will have many views. Please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, all the presenters presented very well, quite informative. I will express 1 minute my view, right? That finally, the net carbon zero by 2050 is the IMO target, has to be achieved, and industry is looking for moving towards that direction. And then I personally feel the final solution is the carbon-free fuel or green fuel or low carbon fuel with some measures. That is the final solution. Meanwhile, any technology improving efficiency, reducing carbon footprint will be there and assisting towards the decarbonization, reducing the carbon footprint. However, this drive, it will be also helpful even the future fuel is carbon-free fuel. So this is a positive drive. It will be useful even if the vessel started using carbon-free fuel. So very good move. Now my question is that as a owner or manager perspective, looking back the vessel technical index, which one of the presenter presented from China Merchant Group, taking that, so that my understanding is that taking the technical improvement, energy efficiency improvement factor is there in the index, but if it is coupled with the green fuel, the name can be given like anything related to the fuel, and merged together so that the owners or operators can be benefited from the incentives. The incentives can come from the charter using that index, or incentive can come from the government fund, like which is the green fund, which IMO is like intending to set forward. So that is my question, that how owner operator can be practically benefited taking the VTI technical index, as well as I suggest one more index from the fuel, like that if owner started using green fuel, which is more expensive at the moment, but reducing the carbon footprint, that index also to be considered for calculating the incentives.
You can just think about it, right? You know, whether you think this can all be integrated into something. How about other comments or questions? Yes, please.
Thank you, Christine. I have a question for either Shane or Patrick, who want to take it. With regards to vessels which have already been installed with WAPS, and we are trying to compare the performance when the sails are operating and not operating, how do you quantify or moderate the data for the extra weight and resistance when the sails are not working but still deployed?
Okay, can I take some more questions? I just want to see what's the feeling in the room. Anyone else? Yes, please. Here. Is there a mic? Oh, sorry.
My question is
Yes.
for Patrick. Given your role as in sales, I'm curious to know what the feedback you get from when you're presenting these new techs, which clearly there are savings and you can display, you know, what the upside is, you know, the range of responses you get when you're presenting, you know, these technologies to ship owners or ship managers. Curious to know what the feedback you get from them is and what that range is, just from a sales perspective.
First off, thank you for all the presentations. It was very insightful. My question is for Patrick, but I guess for the whole panel. With regards to kind of the case studies on bulkers, containers, but just throwing it out there, as Mr. Hare just mentioned, is what's key is the incentives, actually. With regards to, say, bulkers, you know, the Baltic Dry, for tankers, the world scale, has there been any... Has there been any links to kind of the technologies that we can deliver, linking it to kind of, you know, the incentive schemes for, you know, shipping? So just maybe an unconventional question, but throwing it out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to follow up on the question to Patrick. Regarding your technology, your technical the solutions here in Hong Kong. I want to bring back to Hong Kong. What do you think the high potential here for Hong Kong ship owners and the leasing companies, the Hong Kong end? From financial perspective, what do you think is the needs actually here in financial perspective? I think Sean talked a lot of like blended finance models. Maybe from his research, what exactly the potential we can do something here in Hong Kong to make this, to accelerate the whole process? I'm so sorry, Patrick, I just brought up another question to you.
I think I better start answering some of these questions before I forget them.
And Sean, your paper, right? The paper, so please circulate it to us and we can distribute it to the audience who are here today. You seem to have the bulk of the questions.
Yeah, but I can be quick because I think the other panel guys can contribute a lot. First question was quite straightforward about when you add on a wind-assisted propulsion device and what's your reference. It adds weight and it adds wind resistance actually as well when it's not functioning. And that's a simple calculation from pre-installation to after installation. So that is, if you read the Maersk McKinsey Institute, that they are working really hard on a model that everyone can agree on in terms of how to evaluate the efficiency savings. And they go into quite a lot of detail about that, and it's very interesting. And once you see the level of detail that they're going into, it's comforting to say, yes, we can stand behind this model. We can all sit around and agree that this is a trusted model, and we can all take a share of whatever the savings are from that. The customers, everyone is really interested. Everyone's heart's in the right place. They want to use less fuel, of course, for dollars, but they want also most customers have shareholders, and they're reporting to those guys about what are they doing to reduce their carbon footprint on the planet. And even commercially with Amazon and Nike and these big companies demanding companies to be doing something in this space. So there's commercial pressures pushing ship owners as well. So the interest is very high, and the follow through is not there. And as I said, coming back, it's really hard to finance. Someone mentioned something about finance and the bridge, but what I see is the difference from CapEx and OpEx, and that's even within the company that they struggle to justify a capital expenditure versus. So maybe there's something in there for wind sale people to do buybacks or something. They're very expensive to put in, even though the chart that I put was that say they have a high rate of return, but I think that the capital expenditure at the start is high for the wind-assisted propulsion. They're not cheap. I think there was more questions.
Okay. I think, Shane, some questions for you.
Yeah, there was a few. I was taking notes. Apologies if I got it wrong. I think on the first one as well, I'll also echo Patrick's thoughts. It's a very good question. Once you've installed the equipment, there is drag, there is extra resistance, and that can't be turned off, and it's there. So we can do calculations before and after, but and there are other ways of doing this. The Maersk Centre have one way, Class have other ways. To be honest, the issue there is that there isn't a standard way of doing that calculation. Anyone can do it slightly differently, and then you get a slightly different number. So I think the resolution to that is standards, ISO standards, IMO regulations, guidelines. And on the other one, on the finance, if I could chip in as well on what perhaps the role in Hong Kong could be. I think if we're looking at finance to solve some of these risks and challenges, sure, blended finance and what I talked about was one way, but we also need to look at incentivizing financial players to get involved in this kind of thing. Because a regular loan is not worth the hassle of going through all these complications with tracking ships for a bank. So taxonomies, capital relief, allowing banks to be able to recognize these investments and report these investments as green or transitional or supporting the industry in some way, and providing them with relief on the back end. So in the EU, there is capital relief, i.e. the bank has to hold less of that capital in reserve when they've invested in green loans. These kind of things can incentivize them to get involved, because you need a bit of a push as well as a pull to undertake this big headache, frankly.
So I don't know whether Sabrina or some of the owners here would like to share some perspective. If there's no pressure to part with your money, it's it's up to you to decide, right? I'll come to you in a minute. And, with the question from the Hong Kong Green Finance Association, we have exactly the same problem with a much, much simpler sector, and that's retrofitting buildings. In Hong Kong, right, we see retrofitting buildings as really essential. The government says it's essential. The savings are proven. The technology is much, much simpler than what you guys are doing. But unless you have some real push, it's happening slowly. So one of the parallel discussion we're having, as I said, at a much simpler level, because the technology is simpler, is how do we even retrofit buildings, right, in a city? So I think with shipping, it's much more complicated. Not that bankers don't want to lend, because bankers today have net zero pledges. But for example, who comes up with some kind of incentive? Is it the government of a jurisdiction? Is it, are there some other kind of mechanisms? What do you want managers and owners to come up with? Is there some way to aggregate, so it becomes a bit more interesting? I mean, these are all quite difficult issues. So there was one more question. Let's take this question from the gentleman. And I wonder, Sabrina, whether you're willing to say something, both from your personal perspective and also the committee now that you sit on for the government to think through some of these things. Please.
It's not a question. I just wanted to give a ship owner's perspective. Ship owners are sitting on a lot of money. It's not that we don't have the money. We don't want to spend money on something on which the ROI is not there. So I'll give you an example of Anemoi, right? Anemoi were the first Flettner rotors which came. And in 2018, they were fitted on a ship called MV Afros. So just last week, there was a press release from them that in 8 years, they have saved 1,400 metric tons of fuel. So the savings per year is just $100,000. And if you are going to get an ROI of 25 years, then you will not have any ship owners put such equipment. So it is basically how ship owners look at things is, what is the practical ROI? On paper, it looks very good, 30% savings. But nobody is talking of what is a metric ton fuel saving for that particular ship. So till that ROI is good, I don't see ship owners spending money. It's not a question of not having the money. It's a question of whether you will get the returns or not. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Sabrina, maybe some comments from you, and then maybe some final comments from members of the panel.
Thank you, Christine. I think for ship owners to make that kind of investment, it also very much depends on your business model as well. Like if you are a time charterer, time chartering most of your ships, then you don't really get the benefit from that because you don't get higher charter rate, to be honest. And then, of course, the downtime that we all talked about, and then all the training that's involved as well, especially if you're a bulk owners, that you're not on a fixed route, then, and then your crews get swapped so many times, and how many people can you really train? So the scalability of this is very important. Of course, unless you have, a fixed trade that will put your fleet of ships with very low CII, then maybe these are the sort of owners that could look into technologies like that, because you see immediate benefit to them in terms of their operating model. So I think that is a very big consideration. I'm not going to repeat all the points that's already made already. And I think for Hong Kong as well, sitting as a member of the Maritime and Port Development Board, I think green financing, it's definitely one area that our government is focusing on, and not really having any idea how to go about this. So, that's definitely taking notes and inspiration from Shane here to see, how Hong Kong can play a bigger role in the whole picture, because this is, as you know, Christine, this is the direction that the Hong Kong government is very much focusing on, and, leveraging sort of Hong Kong as an international financial and maritime center to be doing a lot more in this space. Thank you.
Well, perhaps I can ask each panel member just to round off by saying a few words, starting with you, Daniel.
Well, I think for the ships to install the energy efficiency technologies, especially for those very, how to say, big and very, very innovative technologies. Well, if the shipping industry for the Hong Kong area, especially for the small medium ship companies to make to apply it for all of them the ships, it will need a push by the policies from the government, some rules. I mean, for some of the ship owners here, maybe you already have installed like the wind propulsion or onboard carbon capture system on maybe only one or two of your ships as a pilot project. But if we want to make these innovative technologies for all the fleet, that must be need like the financial from the financial company, and to implementation for all the fleet. I think this need some like government policies push. And this is very important, especially for Hong Kong, the city. We can also not only to follow like the international or some regional rules regarding to the emission and encouragement, but we could also can think about to make its own. Yes.
Okay, Billy is showing me the 1 minute, so just very quick comments from each one of you. Okay. Any final comments?
I will talk about some the ship owners. Okay, the ship owners can demonstrate fuel efficiency improvements through enhanced VTI, securing fuel cost sharing allocations that convert technical excellence into commercial value. And for the charterers, they gain risk mitigation and predictable fuel consumption performance, and eliminate the need for claims disputes. So maybe the new constructing model is on the way. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a lot of things to say, but I think that the one thing Sabrina mentioned, digitalisation, I think, in the intro, and then maybe that's the piece that's missing that brings it all together, so that the finance people, the equipment supplier, the owner and the manager and everyone else, they all have clear, transparent visibility about what's happening on the vessel. And even getting digitalisation working for shipping is still very complicated and difficult, and coming up with many challenges there. But, you know, I think hopefully it's going to be a kind of a cliff moment where everything falls in place and then we say yes, because the fundamentals of the savings, using less fuel and distributing that saving across the stakeholders, seems to me to be clear, and it's just getting the pieces in place.
Thank you. So echoing on what Patrick said, you know, as a ship manager, I think we are enablers and we are influencers. So hopefully more managers, like the gentleman said there earlier on about, you know, costs being an issue, we can be enablers to make sure that we get the savings delivered from just the papers that promise, you know, the case studies that promise these savings, but we get the crew trainings done, we get the people on board awareness, and they understand what they need to do so that we can actually show these savings and be the influencers to help get this moving and help get the financial models aligned.
Finally.
Actually, I think the comments from the crowd are very important. So from Pacific Basin in particular, I mean, the commercial lens needs to be in place. For technologies like this to scale, for these projects to really scale, we need to look at it commercially. The economics needs to work out, and so the business case needs to be built around all these challenges. We need to address all these problems and have sustainable incentives and sustainable economics in place.
Finally, I just want to say that for the Hong Kong government, because Sabrina and others, you're working on advising the Hong Kong government, how important is it for Hong Kong, if we want it to be competitive and to be a leader, what are the things that we will have to do? And the money side, the technology side, the infrastructure side that we need to provide for our port, the role of electrification, what are some of the lower hanging fruits and who has to pay for what, how the pay will be shared, because the transition is incredibly expensive. And we're doing it at the same time in shipping and other industries. You know, so I think cities or ports that are able to find formulas where cost is shared in a fair way amongst different stakeholders is very, very important, but highly challenging. So Billy, I'm sorry to have taken 5 minutes out of your tea time.
Yeah, please, thank you, Christine, and 5 panelists. We now have tea time, and but cut it short, 10 minutes is okay? So please come grab a coffee. Okay, let's start for the part 2. We have ABS Chantal to share with us the IMO perspective, all the certification framework. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yes. This next, okay. This part, okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chantal from class ABS. So, as a part 2 session, we will be focused on a very particular area, which is about fuel certification, particularly for renewables like biofuels, e-fuels. So today, as we know that as under the IMO, biofuel is one of the most important alternative fuels to cut emission for shippings. So first, let's take a look at the role of biofuel for shipping. On the left side, we did a projection for the future shipping mix. You can see the dark gray area where here. We can see that biofuel, particularly means biodiesel today we are using widely for shipping, will have some kind of presence for shipping, but to be honest, we don't expect that biodiesel can play a very important portion for shipping's powering, because we believe that the other renewable energies like green methanol, green ammonia will play more important role for greenhouse gas reduction for shipping. Okay, on the left, we need to answer a question: why does the shipping industry have to use biofuel today? Because you can see here, based on the data of 2024, we found that over than 23% of vessels are rated as CMMI rated as D and E, which means that these vessels are losing competitiveness in the market. We need to do something to improve their CMMI. So one of the best and immediate solutions is to use biofuel. From this chart, you can see that over the past 3 years, the use of biofuel has significantly increased, almost 6 times if we compare the use in 2024 to 2022. Okay, so we can see that biofuel today is small, but it's very important for the shipping industry, because for most of existing ships, this is the best way to improve their emission performance. Of course, you can do electrification retrofit, but if you need to have significant greenhouse gas reduction, you must rely on biofuel, especially for existing vessels. I know that most of our ship owners are implementing their plan for biofuels. Okay. Talking about biofuels, but how do you know biofuel can save your greenhouse gas emission? At the moment, just mentioned by our previous speakers, particularly from Sabrina, there's only one interim regulation from the IMO to identify the greenhouse gas emission from biofuel. So at the moment, IMO doesn't have a holistic regulation to cover all the aspects for biofuel and other renewables. So here, this is the interim regulation. And under this context, for most of our ship owners, shipping companies, the most commonly used evidence to show the greenhouse gas emission from the biofuels is this kind of statement. We call it POS, Proof of Sustainability, issued by ISCC. I'm not going to do an advertisement, but this is the truth. This is the most commonly used evidence to show the greenhouse gas reduction. And IMO is now, initiating its own regulation, the 2024 LCA guidelines, life cycle assessment guidelines. We think that it's the backbone for the shipping industry to achieve net zero by 2050. Okay, and these guidelines actually set a framework for, we call it well-to-tank emission, tank-to-wake emission, and finally the well-to-wake emission, which is the basis for the future, probably you know that GFI regulation. If we don't have this LC guideline, then we have no way to understand the greenhouse gas fuel index for your vessel. And this framework covers the whole value chain of the fuels that you're going to use on board, including traditional fossil fuel and the renewables. And there's very important thing we call it fuel life cycle label. This label can tell you the characteristics of the fuel, especially the renewable fuel you are using on board, the origin, and the greenhouse gas saving, and the other properties. Okay. Some particular elements to highlight in this IMO guidelines. This guideline set some few pathway codes to identify different type of fuels. For instance, biofuel is one of them, and this code captures some key characteristics such as mentioned, fuel type. And most importantly, I need to highlight the feedstock orange. And later on, we will dive into this aspect, because as we know that we only know that we're using biofuel, but we don't know how the biofuel is produced and where is it from. And we don't know the real sustainability aspect of this biofuel. But in the future, we need to know this. We will set some particular criteria of this. And of course, to include the production and the process and the energy source, of course, used for the production. And there's another thing I need to highlight. So for some specific fuel pathways, usually we use the default values to indicate the greenhouse gas emission for this fuel. But we know that the production pathways are different, especially in different regions and from different feedstocks. So in order to show the lower greenhouse gas emission from this particular fuel, so we are encouraged to issue the actual values for your vessel. And IMO initiated this mechanism for you to report the actual value. I know that even some oil majors, they are doing this kind of study to show that my LNG has a lower emission than yours. Okay, of course, my biofuel, my green fuel has lower emission than yours. So this is a good mechanism for all the new oil producers to significantly or continuously improve their carbon footprint to have even lower greenhouse gas emission footprint, which is much, much beneficial to our owners. Okay. Here I would like to talk something about the latest outcome from the MEPC. Unfortunately, the industry is pushing to have some amendments for this LCE guide, but during this MEPC 84, no amendments adopted. But this meeting gave us some direction. For instance, we need a uniform understanding of this representativeness and the conservativeness for the well-to-tank default factors. Okay. And here we highlight some of the country of origin. As mentioned, it can identify the emissions from particular regions. And we know that the only regulation under IMO is the interim regulation. So today, water certification must improve in the IMO context. Today we know that with ICC, with RED, so under IMO, we need to first prove the actual wet wake emission. And then we need to report all greenhouse gas emissions separately. And of course, we need to think about one thing, that is but ILUC, or indirect land use change, which is very important for biofuel where you are using today. If this criteria cannot be met, then probably this biofuel cannot be used in the future. Okay. So how these different mechanisms can be incorporated together with IMO? So actually, today IMO's regulation very much rely on the existing schemes like ICC, RCB, and RED, COSIA. But there are still some gaps that will again remains. So we believe that in the coming years, IMO will further improve their LCE guidelines to incorporate the existing international schemes. And here I just want to highlight the role of physical assurance. We know that today, when you are going to buy a biofuel, you just got a set of paper to show the fuel's characteristics. But in the future, in order to ensure the carbon integrity, we need to have some like physical insurance, like fingerprinting, like tracers, like we call this custody chain integrity, to make sure that you are going to purchase the eligible biofuel in the future. Okay, finally, as far as I know that Hong Kong is aiming to build a sustainable fuel hub, and certification of this kind of new fuels will be one of the efforts. So here we have some suggestion and probably a blueprint for Hong Kong. There are three pillars. First, we need to build a clear institutional interface, to have all the stakeholders verified together to make sure that the biofuels has the carbon integrity. And second, we need to minimize the data package. We don't want to create barriers for ship owners because it's very complicated. So we need to set a clear and simple data collection system for all owners. Okay. And finally, we need to have a registry linkage to make sure that we don't overlap our efforts. So that Hong Kong need to be aligned with all the existing international schemes. And finally, we think that we need to create a friendly environment for all the stakeholders. So we're not going to create barriers for owners, for all stakeholders. So, and as far as I know, in mainland China, China is also creating a green fuel certification system. But I don't think that Hong Kong will need to create a independent one, individual one. So Hong Kong, we believe that can be incorporated for the existing schemes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chantal. And second speaker will be Miss Julie. He's from T&E, talking about the misleading. Not this one. Okay. Yeah.
I thought my turn is way back, but yeah. This one I can use it. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Jude, and I'm actually managing APAC offices of T&E, which we have offices in Singapore, including myself. Came from Australia, so 2 hours and 30 minutes. The time difference is a bit very strange now, but anyway. So my question is very simple here. Biofuels sustainable or sustainable solution for your business. So for those who has no idea who T&E is, we have been operating based in Europe for the last 35 years, working on the clean transport and energy transition. And then now, from last year, we have expanded our program to Asia Pacific. So we already have people in office in Singapore, in Indonesia, and we're working with a local partner in Australia. Myself is from South Australia, which there is, I can say, the world's largest decentralized rooftop solar. And then many times in the summer day, all of our local electricity is powered by renewable energy. The only question we ask to the South Australian government is there is no cross-sector renewable energy plan, including hydrogen. So anyway, and that's the one. And then, so today I'm going to cover these 3 sections. First one is the biofuel. Are they sustainable? And then it will be a very interesting topic because I'm sure there are so many people now working on the biofuel as the green fuel or bridge fuel. They name them in a very various identity. And then here, simply, I don't impose one solution, but I actually utilize this platform to discuss what type of biofuel we are looking at for the shipping sector, and then how we are going to look at the biofuel, and then what type of biofuel are we talking about here. And then section 2 is the climate reality and the role of a biofuel. And then last one, better alternative for decarbonizing the transport sector. But for today, we can actually consider Hong Kong's role instead of those broader solutions. So since climate change has been recognized as humanity's greatest challenge, so net zero technology are not only recognized as environmental solutions, but also as, of course, the business and economic strategic tool that will shape the future or maybe present competitiveness of corporations and nations. And in such a intense global race, many times, often, the weakness of the easy-looking solutions are often the hardest to see. I can see biofuel that way. So, as you can see, a handful numbers of countries are producing biofuels. And then more than, you can see today, make 4% of the global transport already actually use biofuel. That's very significant from some perspective. And then more than 90% of the global production is located only 10 countries. As you can see, the US, Brazil, and Indonesia are the ones who are playing big role. And then emerging players like India, mainland China, and then Canada are following. And when your economic system has been depending on a handful numbers of oil producers, we always have experienced a painful price volatility, unexpected economic impact due to the oil crisis. often we forgot what kind of crisis we have been going through. When we look back retroactively what happened to COVID, it's like it seemed to be really far away. But what the mainland Chinese government did since 2020, they decided to speed up electrification for their economy, for the industry, and across the sector. And then all the other countries or the major governments, also including the EU, has been hesitating to fully electrify after that. 5 minutes, really? Really? So still, despite all the strong narratives about the waste or next generation biofuel narratives, still by 20%, still 90% of biofuels will be coming from the crop-based. And then there are 3 major crop-based pathway, mostly corn and corn ethanol, and then as well as a palm biodiesel, and including the sugarcane ethanol. And then, of course, in this case, so I want to really share with you guys, today crop-based biofuels require almost the land size of Italy, and by 2030 it will be increasing to the size of France. This matters because it's not only about fuel. This is about the how we use scarce land in a resource-constrained world. Is it really sustainable? Is it a really efficient way to use land in this sense? And then when you can see, the efficiency problem is massive. Using crop-based or crops, and then to produce a liquid fuel, and then you burn the liquid fuel inside of the different engines, it's extremely inefficient to use land and renewable energy. As you can see, if you could use the same land area with electricity, 90 times more electric cars you can actually produce and charge. The climate reality. So indirect land use change, ILUC is a really huge thing, but of course it is also very difficult to calculate it. So many LCA doesn't quite actually include this fact well right now. So when you think about indirect land use change, if your land is diverted from food to fuel, food demand doesn't disappear. It shifts to somewhere else, creating pressure for new farmlands, often through the deforestation or land conversion. But I received one question at the workshop. I'm going to protect his identity for his privacy. He asked me, there is no food shortage problem anymore in the world. It was quite shocking to listen to that question. Food shortage problem still visibly existing. We are living in the very wealthy East Asia and the APEC region, so we may not see in front of us, but still almost 2.6 billion people face the nutrition food insecurity. Yeah. And then high demand, because of this kind of a supply limitation, the policymakers, of course, look at then what is the more sustainable biofuel? And then they all look into a waste-based biofuel, including used cooking oil. But as you can see, used cooking oil's potential is very limited. If all the sectors, heavy sectors, shipping, aviation, everybody jump into it, the price of volatility will look like what we have experienced with oil, and it will definitely create a lot of pressure for the land, which is already suffering from the food production or climate impacts and the nature protection. So certification, I have a lot of things to say, but I'm not going to touch it too much because the previous presenter also highlighted it too. The whole issue right now, the physical testing and verification is very limited. As you can see in mainland China, 90% is all going through the paper-based. And then the other, Indonesia again. Indonesia, one, I can share the very specific cases. Last year, the Indonesian government has launched the wide investigation against biofuel fraudulent cases. Because their import-export amount hasn't actually matched well. And then, of course, they found that all fraudulent cases is almost $900 million worth of the tax waste. So we really need to think about this verification is, is good enough for us to invest in for long-term fuel strategy. And this is a regulation risk as well. If Hong Kong really wants to be part of the new bunkering port in this shipping ecosystem, we really need to think about what type of the fuel we want to invest in for long term, and then what type of infrastructure to support their pathway. Do we really need to go through complicated, the biofuel certificate and all ILUC-based law, or do we really connect it to the e-fuel pathway, as well as the renewable energy expansion in this sense? So that's the, I think that's the end of this in Hong Kong. I think when we look at the current bunkering ecosystem, of course, Singapore is one of the largest bunkering hub. But in the future, it may not look like that. It's the future, the ship owners will find the ports that can actually provide the fuels that they want to access. And I think that's the key part there for Hong Kong. What type of a fuel will be the ones, for ship owners or ship operators who wants to make their business to net zero. Thank you.
Now we have the first speaker, also from GCMD, Dr. Priscilla. He will talk about a very interesting topic. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Let me start by setting the context. Drop-in biofuel, especially FAME and HVO, are always seen as the immediate solution for shipping decarbonization. The reason is simple, because they can deploy in the existing supply chain. However, their adoption is not without challenges. The real risk and the real question sit across the supply chain, from feedstock sourcing and processing to blending, delivery, and onboard use. So, if we want the drop-in biofuel to scale credibly, we need a framework that assures quality, quantity, and GHG abatement. This aligns with what we have heard through our consultation with the stakeholder in the industry. To move from concept, GCMD partner with stakeholders to run 4 supply chain trials using the FAME and HVO blend. The objective was to test not only whether the fuel can be used on board the vessel, but also to test the assurance processes around it. We ran each trial using the very systematic approach, collect fuel sample data, deploy technologies enabling the traceability, and tested their robustness, and map available documentation such as BDN, COQ, and surveyor report against what is actually needed for the assurance. The aim is to capture the learning, practical learning, and use this insight to develop our framework. As mentioned earlier, our framework is built around 3 core assurance pillars. Quality is the question of, can we use it reliably? Will it run safely? That comes down to understanding of the fuel stability and whether it can stay compatible when we blend and handle alongside the conventional marine fuel. GHG abatement is the question of, does it make a difference? Are we really cutting the emission? That depends on credible sustainability criteria, accurate GHG accounting, and traceability across the supply chain. And the quantity is the question of, did we get what we paid for? Can we verify the biofuel component fraction in the blend and have it properly captured in the documentation? Together, these three pillars deliver transparency and integrity across the marine fuel supply chain. This is important for building confidence, supporting investment, and enabling wider adoption. Let me first go into the quality pillar, starting with the flame stability. We all know that flame is susceptible to the environmental factor, including heat, water, oxygen, and microbial contamination. As shown in this slide, this factor can lead to different degradation mechanisms and undesirable byproducts that can affect the fuel quality and shipboard system. So what GCMD did, in this pilot, we tracked flame quality over 5 months under commercial operating conditions. The objective was to see how the fuel quality evolves over time and how it varies across different points in the supply chain. We monitor key indicators like viscosity, acid value, calorific value, free fatty acid, and microbial contamination. The plot here shows the acid value over 5 months. Importantly, we don't see any upward trends or any step change across the sampling point. We saw the similar trend with other parameters as well. The message is clear. Flame quality remains stable throughout the monitoring period, giving the confidence that today's supply chain can handle flame without introducing any critical quality concern. Having said so, the regular check should be conducted, especially if you want to store the biofuel on board very long time. So now let's move to the compatibility, specifically for HVO blend. HVO is mainly made up of paraffinic hydrocarbons. When paraffinic HVO is blended into the certain VLSFO stream, it can reduce the fuel ability to keep asphaltene dissolved. In simple terms, the blend can lose asphaltene solvency. When that happens, the asphaltene will precipitate out, like what you can see from the spot test here, and the total sediment potential. Operationally, this means sludge formation, filter clogging, and deposit risk. So the key takeaway is that HVO isn't automatically mix and go with any type of fuels. The specific batch and the blend ratio matter. Simple compatibility screening like spot test and total sediment potential helps prevent this issue. We also investigated the impact of continuous use of the biofuel on board the vessel. Over 6 months, we carried out 4 bunkering of B24 from UCOME and VLSFO, around 1,000 tons each round. During this period, the vessel accumulated around 3,000 hours on the main engine, 1,800 hours on the auxiliary engine, and 3,000 hours for the purifier. Through the in-operation monitoring and post-trial inspection, we did not observe any major issue affecting the ship performance. We also store B24 on board the vessel over 6 months. Yes, we see the upward trend of the acid value, but it's still well below the limit in the ISO 8217. To scale quality alone is not enough. We need confidence that the fuel delivered is sustainable and consistent with what it claims. From the IMO 2023 interim guidance, biofuel that can be used for shipping must be certified under an international certification scheme with at least 65% well-to-wake emission reduction. That is a good start, but one challenge is that this guidance doesn't specify one single certification scheme. In practice, as you can see from this slide, there are many sustainability certification schemes. Although they cover similar core areas like the feedstock, GHG emission reduction threshold, environmental safeguard, and the socio-economic criteria, the detailed requirements are not always fully aligned. So, two fields could both be described as certified sustainable, but they may have been assessed against different requirements. This creates risk of inconsistent interpretation across markets and countries. That's why greater convergence is important, either through harmonized sustainability criteria or mutual recognition of credible schemes. In fact, IMO 2024 LCA guidelines have defined the sustainability theme, focusing on the environmental criteria, but the detailed operational requirements are expected to be further elaborated through the Sustainable Fuel Certification Scheme for Marine Fuels. After looking into the need for harmonization of the sustainability criteria, the next question is, how do we make sure that the fuel delivered actually matches what is declared on the paper? As sustainable biofuels scale up, there are growing concerns around fraud, especially mislabeling. This is not just a shipping issue, but it has been observed more broadly in biofuel supply chains. So this is where fuel level verification can play a role. The idea is not to replace certification scheme, instead to add another layer for the assurance. GCMD has explored approaches to confirm authenticity of the fuel, detect adulteration, and verify biocomponent fraction in the blend. Today, I will share our work on the tracer. If we can think about tracer into two categories. One is the intrinsic tracer, which is the fuel own built-in signature, like a chemical fingerprint, and the extrinsic tracer, which is the added marker that we introduce to the fuel, and we can track them in the supply chain. For the physical tracer, GCMD has tested 3 tracer candidates from 3 technologies. One is the synthetic DNA, another one is element-based tracer, and the last one is organic compound tracer. This slide shows how we conduct the tracer trial. We map the marine fuel supply chain, identify potential integration points of the tracer, leverage existing marine fuel supply chain operation for tracer dosing. We do the sample collection and then analyze the sample for the tracer presence and concentration. We evaluated the tracer candidates using 3 main criteria: technical feasibility, whether the tracer is present at the expected concentration; operational consideration, whether how easy we can introduce the tracer into the supply chain; and economic viability, including the cost of the tracer itself and the cost of the analysis. Based on our evaluation criteria and trial result, we carry out benchmarking exercise to assess whether which tracer approach is most practical for implementation and scalability. Among these, as you can see, tracer C present the most practical solution, giving us the effective balance between cost, detectability, and scalability. However, the broader message is not simple about adopting one tracer. While the pilot showed that tracer-based verification is possible, the bigger objective is to develop a traceability framework that defines the technology, where it fits in the supply chain, who deploy it, who verify it, and what to be reported. Now let's move into another technology that we deploy, film fingerprinting. The idea is simple. Film carries a natural chemical fingerprint that depends on its feedstock. Different feedstock give different patterns. Film from palm oil, soybean oil, used cooking oil, or other sources can show different fatty acid profiles. This fingerprint can be analyzed using gas chromatography, which you can find it in the common marine fuel laboratory. Also, this technique can be used with neat FAME as well as the blended FAME in the heavy fuel oil, make it practical option for the real world. The next part of the work, we blind tested 16 market sample. We took their fingerprint and comparing against the fingerprint from known reference sources. The results show that several samples were consistent with their supplier label, the first group, particularly the FAME from the virgin vegetable oil. For the sample declared as used cooking oil derived FAME or Ukome, the results were more mixed. One sample labeled as Ukome appeared to be derived from palm oil and blended with the soybean oil. Several others show fingerprint closely aligned with the virgin palm oil derived FAME. This highlight area where supplier declaration and chemical fingerprint require closer scrutiny. The next step of this work is to define quantitative threshold value for the fatty acid markers or other repeated heating chemical signature to distinguish FAME derived from virgin oil and used oil. Okay, now moving to the third pillar, quantity. Here the focus is on verifying biocomponent in the blend. From our pilot data, we saw that neat FAME purity can be varied, while still remain EN 14214 compliant. When these were blended, the measured FAME content came in below the nominal BXX value. For example, B30 we measure at 26.6%, B24 we measure at 21.5%. These differences are mainly caused by two factors: purity of FAME used and repeatability and reproducibility of the test method. This difference may come even bigger when we introduce the marine grade FAME, which has a lower purity of FAME. To make quantity assurance practical, we need clear standardized verification threshold that account for both FAME purity and measurement uncertainty, so the industry can avoid dispute and keep quantity and emission claim credible. Staying with the quantity, this slide focuses on documentation, specifically BDN. Today, the biocomponent fraction on the BDN is self-declared by the supplier and often supported by COQ. By comparison, other operational and compliance parameters like sulfur content, viscosity, water content, and flash point are measured and recorded as mandatory field in the BDN. So the question is, should we treat biocomponent fraction in the same way? Should the biocomponent fraction be measured and recorded in BDN, so the quantity claims are consistent and auditable? This would help strengthen confidence in both commercial claim and emission reporting. So I come to my final slide, how to operationalize this framework. Operationalize means turning it into practical and repeatable action that can apply across commercial marine fuel supply chain. This requires coordinated action at three levels. One is the end user level. This framework can go into the best practice, fuel acceptance, and fuel management. Policy and standard development. It can support more harmonized requirements for testing, traceability, and sustainability assurance. At the transaction level data capture, the BDN and EBDN can evolve into auditable record that capture verify information on fuels quality, quantity, sustainability, and traceability. Together, this layer provide pathway to move from the pilot assurance concept to routine commercial practices, helping to safeguard the credible use of drop-in biofuel. Actually, if you can see in the future, the supply chain will be even more complex when we introduce methanol, biomethanol, e-methanol, or other types of this. So I believe that we need to look into this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. And now we have Mr. Zhao. We have Zhao Jun, China Carbon Manager of RINA. Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Hello, good day, everyone. This is Julian from RINA China. And it's a great pleasure to be here and share the information of sustainable fuel certification with everyone. Okay. The topic will consist several parts. For example, the Renewable Energy Directive, IED, biofuels, bioliquids, biomass fuels, IFNBO, ICF, the certification procedure, and the RINA service. Okay, the first part is about Renewable Energy Directive, the IED. And as many people will know, in 2009, the EU defined a series of binding targets for member states to meet by 2020 for the GHG reductions. For example, it requires the 20% energy from renewable source, while for transportation sector, the share will be 10% of energy from renewable source. Then in 2018, it was developed into the ID2. Also, with the ID2 was published. Then in ID2 defines the increase of renewable energy share from 20% to 32%. While for the transportation sector, the share of renewable energy will from the 10% to 40%. And now is developed into the ID3. ID3 also increased the share of renewable energy share to from 32% to 42.5%. And also in transportation sector, the share of renewable energy from the 40% to 29%. So the whole intensive shows the share of renewable energy, not only for the other sector, but also for the transportation, also increase. This is the increasing tendency. Then for Italy also already implemented the ID2. Then also next will be ID3. The legislation already published since December of 2021. Then for the ID2 not only defined the biofuel, bioliquids, biomass fuels, something like that. Then in ID2, introduced some important sectors. One is the liquid and gases fuel from renewable sources or non-biological origin, that is IFNBO. The second important fuel is recycled carbon fuel, that is ICF. Here is the general description of different meaning of biofuels, bioliquids for different market. So we can see here biofuel normally means the fuels meant for the transport area, and the bioliquids normally for the area for the market of electricity and heating and cooling, and for biomass fuels and FNBO covered all these three market types, and while ICF is only for the transportation area. The next part is about biofuel, bioliquids, and biomass fuel. Here is we always know the different origins of biofuels. For example, one type is the vegetation origins. For example, palm, soil, sunflower, sugarcane. Another important part is the Western origins. For example, Yuko use coconut oil, straw, organic waste. And we also know we also know the biomass fuels have several advantages. For example, the waste does not go to landfill, and its acquisition involves reduce cost and has a lower carbon footprint, and promoting the circular economy as well as promoting industrial symbiosis. On the other hand, there are also some questions, issues about the biomass. For example, the GHG emissions, cost of loss of biodiversity or due to land use change, social issues, rising food prices, possible flood for biomass from waste and the residues, something like that. Anyway, how to transfer the renewable, make the renewable energies fuels to be sustainable fuels. ID actually defined several criteria, including land use criteria, GHG reduction, and good agriculture and environmental conditions. That means the fuels produced from the west. If fuels produced from waste residues other than agriculture, fishery, and forestry, these fuels must only fulfill is GHG saving criteria because they are waste. Okay, next is about the FNBO and the ICF. FNBO is means the renewable fuels of non-biological origins, liquids, gases, fuels from renewable energies. For example, using the hydrogen produced in electrolysis using renewable electricity. Then ICF is means the recycled carbon fuels, liquid gases, fuels produced from liquid or solid streams of non-renewable origins, which are not suitable for material recovery. For example, pyrolysis oil from the fossil part of end of lifetime. The criteria define the IED for FBO, for example, including the GHG saving 30% threshold. In addition, also other rules like additionality, temporary correlation, geographical correlations. So for different situations where some special rules will apply. For example, for the direct connection of installation generation, the additional rule will apply. For electric electricity from the grid, the additionality, also the PPA. The PPA means the basic power purchase agreement, and temporary correlation and geographic correlation as defined as required by the ID. These laws will apply. So that means a different situation will different criteria will be applied. The next is about the certification procedures. Basically, the certification is a tool that allows people to distinguish sustainable products, final products, intermediate product, and the raw material from those that are not. Certification can also ensure traceability along the entire chain of custody in biofuel, as all organizations involved must demonstrate the compliance of their products with the ID and to be in position of recognized certification. And for different supply chains, normally where different elements were involved, but the logic and the laws will be similar. For example, for the vegetation regions, the farmers, first the gathering point, producer, and other downstream organization, these laws were involved. Then for the western regions, the point origins, collecting point, producers, downstream organizations were involved. Then for FNBO, the electrolyzer products and the other downstream organizations will be involved. So according to the IED directive, there are different schemes. One kind of scheme is the national schemes. Another one is the CE recognized schemes. For the national schemes, for example, for the Italy national schemes, that is IS. For ICCU and 2BS, these two are CE recognized schemes. Actually, these schemes some similar logic and methodology according to IED, but WAPS has some their own characteristics. For example, for INS and 2BS, the certificate were valid for 5 years, while for ICCU, the certificate were valid for 1 year. But also have different. For example, INS for Italian market, ECCU and the 2BS for the whole EU market. And for RINA surveys, RINA actually now we can provide ICCU, 2BS, and INS. And RINA is also the leading and international classification of certificate companies. And we already certified the first ICCU and ICCU CORSIA certificates in China. And we also cooperate with a series of Hong Kong clients, including the Sinopec Hong Kong, Venture Hong Kong, Chapoy something, and so on. And anyway, we always stick to provide professional and high quality service, which will help to make a more excellent, sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Now we have the final speaker for part 2. It's Misleading. He's General Manager China for the VPS.
Hello, thank you. Oh, this one is to change slides, right? Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. That is my honor and the privilege is to speak here and to share today's topic. Basically, is when you see the topic I'm going to share is how fingerprinting gets the fuel quality by tracking fuel traceability. And basically for here, and we'll cover the 3 sections. The first one is fingerprinting. basically this one is techniques and how the technique to further support the current issue for the fuel adulteration and also the marine fuel unstable composition. And the last one is another major problems is for the bunkering, is how the traceability can be sourced out. That's why is that the second part is will be the tracking fuel traceability. So which means is how do we further, when we take in consideration of the life cycle assessment, then the traceability can be secure from the upstream to the downstream. Then the entire session and have an additional one is for the current fuel market regarding of the bunkering. And before I dive into the sections, I would like to share a little bit for the VPS. Actually, the VPS was originally from the DNV, and our past name is the DNVPS. Since 2013, and when the DNV and the GL to merge, so we become the privately owned the enterprise. So, and we do have the 40 years and dive into the fuel quality analysis and is to do the R&D support for the entire industry. And come into here, and actually it's very important for us to know, and we do have the very strict and compliance, and for the each of year, we have the goal to be set for the 2030 and the 2050. Now is 2026, and we do have the very, the urgent and delivery to the 2028, because when the 2028 we do consolidate the enough data, so it can be revised for 2030 regarding of the GG strategy. So why come into this page? Because we need to know what we need to do, because we have to have the clear direction. That is for all the changes. For the first session is energy efficiency technologies, but actually is another very important session is how the fuel quality to do the support for the alternative fuels being deployed when we navigate the uncertainty. That is to map the decarbonization approaches. So it's for what we can do is based on the fuel quality, actually is can be linked to the different sessions, and is to support the entire ecosystem, is to pave net zero GG emissions from the international shipping. So actually the fuel quality is not only the one thing is when we bunkering it. Actually this one is we also is to support the different perspective is from the port control regarding of the terminal, and also is how the ship is a different kind of the ship types, and to use a different kind of the fuels when we do the transition and the sustainable approach. And another one is how the seafarer is can be safely and is to do this transition. So it's come to the next one is this is the current status regarding of the fuel bunkering, and actually and the future shaping decarbonization is full of the uncertainty. So before we want to settle the things, actually is based on what we still have. Then basically it's still the major fuels, it's a conventional fuel, but the biofuels after the pandemic is already picking up. So this is something, and based on the current statistics, and we want to do some forecast and some transition to secure the certification and the verification scheme. Then it's come to here is some slides and is want to share. And because nowadays is do have different kind of fuels, and basically it's conventional fuel and also the alternative fuel for the sustainable perspective. So is we will focus on the biofuel share, and we can see is from the type of the engine and regarding of the design and operation, we need to consider from the certification side and from the one we want to design a different type of the vessel in operation. So the engine is the most important consideration for the entire vessel power. And the following is actually the drop in flexibility regarding of the market demand and supply. Then the third one actually is the main technical requirement and how to support the ICC, and which is like the certification most well known nowadays. And then the verification, that is how the testing standard, then the one like the international standard is we are using now. And the last one actually is the current maturity and how the drop in immediately and is to operate in the shipping. So we can see, and the first tier still is a conventional fuel, but the biofuel, the FAME B20 and the B30 actually have the very good result. And for the type of engine and the diesel and the dual fuel engines, and this immediately can be operated and up to the 100%. And regarding less than the B30, actually is a drop in flexibility available in the market. And come to the main technical requirement actually to support the design, then which is first considered the stable. And once we see the stable, which means the maturity is there. And the next page is for some biofuel share. And we know is biofuel actually have the different sources. And from different sources, actually we have different of the generations. And the different of generations actually is share to the different reduction of the emission. And in short, and the FAME actually is the marine conventional biofuels, and the HVO and also HEFA actually is a premium and the refined biofuel. And come to the last two, the cashewnut and the TPO. Actually, this one considers the low cost, sometimes more suspicious happened for the fuel quality. So which means there is a risk on sustainability production of biofuels, and that's why the traceability of biofuel is very important to ensure the authenticity of the sustainable biofuels to prevent their adulteration. So it's coming to here, actually, so we are going to let you know is actually the market do have the pros and cons when the shipping stakeholders is come to the purchase, and because this one do have the very big capex in consideration when we want to do some new fuel purchase and for the procurement. And another one actually is the big cost when we run a vessel is the OPEX operation. So it's for here, and do have the very remarkable status. The data is for the VPS tested samples, parentheses 71,000 metric tons of the bunkering biofuel in 2021, and compared to the over the 1 million tons of the delivered biofuels in 2025, then this is a remarkable increase by a factor of the 12 over the 4 years. And additional, I want to say, and actually this the biofuel is still very good for the the bunkering trading. Why? Because we already have a standardization on the ISO 8217/2024, which means when we do the trading internationally, and there is some reference and the compliance reports, and based on the ISO 8217/2024, we can get the clear guidance for the different parameters we should do the test to ensure the quality of the fuel. And then it's come to the all in all, actually we want to share is the fingerprinting got the fuel quality by tracking the fuel traceability. Because when we're talking about the traceability, it's not only is to focusing on the one factor or is a one section. Actually, we need to think about is the traceability actually is linked to the upstream and downstream, and how to pass one place and to another point, and the connection and the connectivities, and when we use it. So this is some further question we need to think about it, is what is the real reason and also the real purpose when we want to use it, and how to make the connection from the one point to another one. So like the different kind of the stage, and all of things is some fingerprinting of the fuels, and it's similar like the human beings. And when we have our DNA, something is inside the DNA is going to be changed. Similar like the fuel, and it's like the coming to here is more details and will be shared. The fingerprinting actually have the different purpose and to be served. So it's coming to the marine fuel. Actually, we are tracing the fuel quality stock, and is more focusing on the quality. And when we come to the FAME fingerprinting, and further consider for the source, and because we want to identify the source and to further serve the ICC certification, such as. And that's why is we need to distinguish the source of the FAME. So is to distinguish the source of the FAME actually is to support this certification scheme, and when we use and is trading globally. Then this is something is very honest together with our partner is GCMD, and is we do co-collaborate and develop in some method regarding of the EN 14103 to to facilitate the acquisition of the fin fingerprints. And when we see that down below is to have the different pattern, and basically it's different peaks, and it's when we do the test to show, and it's to where can be identified for the different source of the biofuel. And come to here, and because we wanna say is that the traceability is not only focusing one part, actually it's focusing entire picture regarding of the life cycle assessment. And even the bunkering is our full service, it's our core service, but actually is for the certification scheme is like just now mentioned a few times regarding of the COQ, and COQ also have the parameters need to be stated in, and is passed to the next stage is BDN, and need to still obtain some mandatory figures and come to the verification stage, and to support nowadays the digital bunkering. And we also need to do the testing. So the testing is to support on the commercial side is when we come into the operation. So it's all in all, actually is to support the green corridors and also the different ports when it comes to the green strategy, and to further achieve the IMO emission goals. Then come to here is how the fingerprinting support the end-to-end supply chain visibility. Like just now we mentioned, is traceability is more focusing on the fuel quality issue and the source of the issue. But just now also is got the other class, the most of class IT also have mentioned is for the MEPC and especially for the life cycle assessment part. And there is the fuel identification regarding of the fuel path code. So the further and for the traceability and how to further to support based on the variable parameters, and also is some like the DNA fingerprinting concept is to further support the IMO, that is to get the conclusion. And then is the most important one is like the data assurance actually is we need to consider, because this one is like the IMO is keep mentioning, and we have to have the consistency from the end, from the beginning to the end, so we can ensure this is something the right one and the proper one being recorded. That's why is the data, the consistency is very important. And come to this one is like when we see the fingerprinting is technique, but it's how to make the technique is in the ground, because for each of the stage, when we take the sample of the fuel, this is also important. That is how to do the sampling and how to get the sampling delivered to the laboratory safely. Because it's when we come to the just now mentioned the three questions, right? And is to have the fuel adulteration and also some that is also like marine fuel unstable composition, and the last one is like the traceability. Because each of the transport is good to have the traceability with something is tracked. So when we tracked, we can ensure the sample from the one place to another place actually is the same one. This is further to support the original of the source being checked and verified for the testing. Then how the VPS and is can further support here, and regarding supported with the D&D solutions, because it's for the standardized sampling is the basic ground, is like the operation routine, and we need to perform. We need to have the high standard is come to be the standardization and some guides. And then the next one is from each of the stage, how to track the data and being stored, and for the assessment is to further support the compliance. And lastly is the actually green shipping services and how to link up everything. That is to support the different shipping stakeholders when they make the decision. That's why there is a solution is when we come to the fuel, and because the fuel is like the blood of the vessel, is similar like the blood of the human beings, and it's important. That's why it's when the fuel is linked to the different sectors and even the different operations, the different kind of the performance, and it's do have the traceability and is to be reflected. That's why the fuel quality is very important, especially is coming to the transitional fuel, and the source of the biofuel actually is very important for us to know. And because this one is everything is for the fuel, it can be bunkered safely and with the source, and we can be further identified actually is to support the shipping stakeholders is coming to the green corridor, green ports, and is to come out with the green corridors compliance. Thank you.
So now we have the panel discussion. For all the speakers previously, please come on the stage. And we have also Santao will be our moderator. And there's Tom Uttara. Yeah, he's CEO of the Hong Kong Reconergy. He's expert on the biofuel as well. Yeah. I hand this to Santao.
Okay, please. Since we don't have much time, so we can do it quickly, because I think we're going to talk at 12? 1 o'clock. Okay. 1 o'clock. 20 minutes. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Thank you again, our panelists. So let's set the context. Actually, Hong Kong is going to be a important, we call it, certification hub for renewable fuels. So let's assume that this dream will become true. So the first thing I would like to go to you, because you were not on the stage. Okay. So the question that can a Hong Kong certification hub function? It can be a bridge between the Asian supply chain and the EU sustainability requirements, but without creating barriers for the developing country producers for the renewables. So what do you think?
I think that Hong Kong should look very carefully at existing systems which are already in place. I think that the speakers already talked a lot about ICC. ICC has mentioned in every presentation, and it tells you how important that system is. Myself, I am ICC approved, certified. My company, and actually my auditor is sitting over there, and that's RINA. And just to clarify what that means, because I saw the presentation by RINA, and he said your certificate is valid for 1 year. So, but they were so nice not to tell you what it happens if you do the audit and you don't pass the audit, then you lose your certificate and you're not allowed to do any business anymore. So the penalty is quite severe. So you're in or you're out. And if you meet the requirements, then it's all fine. If you don't, then you're out. So there are very stringent requirements. I think that what you see is that Europe has already decades experience in setting the rules and regulations for the supply chain of these of the feedstocks and the biofuels. And why not tap into that, right? They have the experience, and of course in the past mistakes have been made. They've learned from it. They adjusted the regulations, and they have built on that. And I notice it myself. The audits are becoming more comprehensive every year. There are new things added to the audits. And for example, I can also only do business with people who are certified also. So all my suppliers are certified in China, and all my customers in Europe are also certified. And it tells you also how deep ICC already has come into the supply chain. So all suppliers in the feedstock market in China are all ICC approved, and they are all audited every year. So tap on that. It's already an existing system. It has proven its value and built from there. So that's why, yeah.
Okay, Thank you, Tom. We can feel that, as just I mentioned before, that's to actually we don't need to create a separate scheme that because there are several existing schemes that we can follow, and this can save a lot of efforts. Okay, so and we expect that the biofuel or renewable fuel market is growing faster. So the second question I'd like to give Luigi from RINA. So, how do we balance the rapid market scaling and at the same time with maintaining the credibility and the carbon integrity? This is what we talked several times before. So.
Yes, thank you. Good questions. So, a management system scheme to be scalable needed to be, first of all, reliable, no? And the ICC is a clear example that is reliable because it's existing for many years. No? There was a lot of discussion many years ago about the usage of land for farmer. In Europe, for example, the RED II and the RED III is a clear example of adoption of rules in order to become more transparent against these rules. Going to the question, for sure today there are a lot of other standards. The gamification of the standard could be an opportunity, but also a risk. So the risk is that each country could manage everything by themselves, and at the end of the day, no one understands anymore what to do, because on my left there is a client of us, for example, and they maybe contact us what I should do. No, the opportunity is that a good connection between all the stakeholders could improve the scalability of the scheme. Now, if the market decides that ICC or other new standard should be the best, I suppose that each standard needs to be aligned with the stakeholders. So there are some activity that usually ISO, but not only ISO, also ICC is doing, is the stakeholder engagement. So means that around the table we are seated and discuss about the engagement of the stakeholder. Sometimes, no, I'm European, but living in Asia and for many years, we are the king of the rules, no? You know, all of us, we are the king of the rules, no? And usually, when there was the discussion about electrical vehicle, so we want electrical vehicle, but we cannot produce renewable energy to charge the battery, no? And but when the political part of the European Union asked, but sorry, when we was writing the rules about electrical vehicle, where was the car maker? So at the time was not done a clear engagement of the stakeholder, and one of the stakeholder is and was the car makers. So car makers need, in that case, no, it's a different case. It's only to understand that engagement is important. And in our case is the local authority, the politician party, the municipality, the certification body, the company, and everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the insights from RINA, our colleagues. So let's continue to talk about the rapid scaling market. So I have a question to Jude from T&E. You had less time for the presentation. So how should Hong Kong combine the tension between the environmental integrity, like we mentioned before, this ILUC risk, and the rapid fuel deployment for biofuel? So Jude.
That's a big question. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then maybe ISCC wants to talk more about it because our position is very critical for biofuel, to be honest. But we don't completely ignore the role of a biofuel, you know, to transit the transportation sector. Especially it has to be prioritized for, you know, hard abate sector like aviation. shipping can actually create a lot of different, alternatives. And then there is technology existed, as we have been seeing. As a technology advances, the price drops. Right now, what kind of shipping operators in shipping sector is in limbo situation. That is why it's very difficult to see what technology or what types of technology will be, invested and then fastly supported by the regulators, etc. But for Hong Kong question, for me, Hong Kong has to avoid choosing speed over the uncertainty, like or long-term lock-in unsustainable biofuel investment. So for me, I will think about if when you ask about Hong Kong, it should be actually redefine the position of Hong Kong for decarbonizing the shipping sector here, what type of a bunkering hub they want to be for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Yeah. So I think that's the key part instead of choosing speed for biofuel right now. And then if the older certification supply limit happens and then all different types of the CO2 intensities are passed through the IMO net zero framework continues after the Trump regime, then what's going to happen? So I think the Hong Kong need to really look at that. What is the sustainability criteria they want to see over their port infrastructure in that sense? Yeah.
Can I add into that answer? Actually, you see, Hong Kong is in Asia, is a very biomass resources, rich in biomass, right? Okay, when people talk about food versus fuel, sometimes someone doesn't have anything to eat, this area you are using the fuel using food as a fuel, but you need to think about in certain season, right? Farmer is suffering, and like for example, in my country, Thailand, in certain season, palm oil price is very low, right? So the government turned this into the biofuel. Of course, when we talk about openly about palm oil, it's like, oh, should I talk about it or all those things, right? But I think we need to think about it. It's not all palm oil is bad, right? Same as other types of the first generation feedstock too. If you take a look, actually US side, Brazil, pushing a lot for the corn bioethanol. And now, I think last week, the corn bioethanol from Brazil got approved by IMO with certain criteria. I think this kind of thing we can think about too, yeah.
Okay, thank you for the addition. Julie just mentioned about the net zero framework and the GFI. So I would like to have your opinion. That's it. So we know that in the IMO LCA guide we have actual value of emission, and we have opportunity to claim the actual value. So my question is, should actual value verification under the IMO guideline become mandatory for fuel? If this will happen in Hong Kong, do you think that we should use actual or we use the default value for the IMO framework?
I'm just talking about my own experience. For in Europe and on the ICC, you also need to fill in a sustainability declaration and really specifying the carbon emissions for every step. Right, so you look at where is it actually coming from, the feedstock. For me, used cooking oil, and then it goes by truck 500 kilometers. What's the emission for that? And then it goes onto a vessel and is shipped to Europe. What are the emissions for that vessel, etc., etc. And I think by implementing real values, I think you strengthen the credibility of the carbon emission savings your feedstocks and your biofuels create. So I have a strong preference for actual values. Yeah, but I can imagine with big flows, etc., maybe default values should also be okay. But I tend to go for real values. Because you need to sell, because the renewable fuels are more expensive than the normal fuels. So people need to know, why am I paying extra? Yeah. And the extra is the carbon emission saving, right? That's why.
Yeah. Please.
Okay, the question about default value or actual value, right? In fact, the default value is convenient, right? Yeah, we don't need to measure everything, calculate everything. Okay, one of our supply chain try is a small parcel of the biofuels from one country to another country. You know, when we try to calculate the actual value, it's actually bigger than default value. So I think, yes, we should look into actual value. If otherwise, the default value that put in the EU, all those things, right, need to be adjusted to be more like global scale, yeah.
I also have examples where their real values were lower than the default value. So I think that's why default value is an average of a whole area. And there are, of course, certain areas which are a little bit higher and certain areas which are a little bit lower. So I think it's very difficult to make claims based on a small sample size, let's say.
Okay, thank you. That's so we know the truth that we have several different global schemes like ICC, RSP. So I have a question to RINA. So how can Hong Kong ensure that in the future its certification is mutually recognized internationally, especially by the EU? We assume that there is a system built in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So a little bit we discussed it before, no? So I think that to create a new scheme, it's not maybe the right way, no? At least could be important to adapt some particularity of the scheme to the needs of the country, no? For example, in terms of the percentage of the product that is produced in a place that you need is useful to be, maybe. And this can boost also the local economy for a question of maybe to apply like a C mark local for the production. But producing a new scheme maybe reduce the scalability of the scheme as well, because it's fragmented, no, at the end of the day. The result we need to achieve is to have around the table the stakeholder, I repeat, to understand what is the need and expectation of who buy the biofuel and from who sell the biofuel. And because who buy, for sure, need to adapt the utilization to a technology. Before I was really enthusiastic, no, because you talked a lot about the technology, no, in terms of sustainability on board. You know, I work in a classification society, and I'm not a marine guy, but, you know, in the office, usually, we talk a lot about marine application and so on. I was before in the industry sector, no? And I followed some project about green ammonia, hydrogen, and so on. Technology is there. The adoption depends about the cost, depends about the scalability, depends about the owner. And the same topic is related to certification. I suppose it's important to adopt what is today the better scheme. If Hong Kong wanted to create a new one, it's not an easy going. No, it's not easy because you need to go through round table, through the technical committee, and to be recognized not only in Hong Kong but out of Hong Kong need to be also recognized by ISO committee, technical committee, and so on. I suppose the best way is maybe to follow actually the trend. This should be. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this almost draws a close to our panel discussion today. So we can conclude that first, it seems that as there's not much need to create a independent certification system particularly for Hong Kong, because as we discussed, the first step should be just following the existing ones. Okay, we think that the role of Hong Kong could be more like a regulator. We regulate the use of biofuel. We regulate the use of any other renewable fuels to say if these fuels are in line with the international schemes and IMO schemes. So this could be the priority to do. Okay. But anyway, we respect that Hong Kong's mission to build the sustainable maritime fuel hub. So we believe that in the near term, and Hong Kong's folks will be to first understand and to harmonize the worldwide international schemes requirement, and to produce, to invent the particular requirements that particular for the Hong Kong market. Thank you. Okay, thank you again, my panelists.
For staying on time. I mean, there's a lot of details to absorb. I've certainly learned a lot, but it seems like we have the community of professionals and others here who can help Hong Kong to chart our journey. Again, I just want to repeat that this community of gathering of maritime people for us and HKUST has been so useful for our continuing journey. I'm afraid we're going to continue to bother you, but I hope you feel that by working with us that we can gather each other together, and of course we see you also separately to download a lot of details so that we can continue with our research. We do have a mission to advise the Hong Kong government on the various issues that we discussed today, so it's practically very useful. And of course we actually, in our research, we want to capture the different perspectives. And of course we are not the decision maker, but I think our job is to be able to lay out the perspective, the technical aspects for the decision makers to decide. So thank you very much again for spending so much time with us. Thank you to all the presenters and speakers. Thank you for the very in-depth presentation. I'm sorry about the time, but all the PowerPoints will be put on our website after the event, so that I know some of you are taking pictures and taking notes. You will have all of them for to look through at your leisure. So let me thank you again on behalf of my colleagues. Thank you, Billy, for designing today, and thank you on behalf of HKUST.
I hope to see you in our next event, hopefully November during the Hong Kong Maritime Week. Yeah, thank you.